Woohoo! Welcome back, team. Yes, I want to echo what Kristen added in the chat. So fun to see you all back for day two. I myself have been looking forward to day two of this workshop for months because it means that I have the opportunity to learn with and from Kristen Hunter Thompson, who's here today to lead us through some data exploration strategies, practices. In the chat right now, I'm adding the I'll use air quotation marks the updated agenda for day two because I suspect that as the day goes, this agenda might shift a little bit, but this is the plan for today. So you scroll through that agenda, you can find day two content on the last page or two of that document. Randy, good to see you. Thanks for joining. Randy is one of the co-authors of the Tipping Point Data Puzzle lesson.
Good to see you
Joining
too,
us,
John.
joining us live from Whitefish, Montana. I think, or maybe you're on vacation elsewhere.
No, I'm in I'm in Kalispell, but teaching
Kalispell.
Whitefish Bay. I'm at home right now. Yeah.
Well, thanks for being here, Randy. Yeah, we're
Oh
we're
yeah,
looking forward to this.
me too.
Thanks also to those of you that have submitted um, your student worksheets from yesterday and completed that feedback survey. I'm going to add that to the chat right now. In case folks weren't able to complete that survey yesterday, perhaps you can get to that during the break today, one of our many breaks today, or dive in right now. But yeah, it was really fun to see how you all plan to potentially use parts or all of that tipping point data puzzle resource, ways that you would modify these resources. Selfishly, that's kind of my favorite part because it gives me some strategies and ideas for ways to improve these resources. Joanne, yeah, and there were a couple of you, and this can work as well. If you had problems uploading your student worksheet from yesterday, you can just email it to me. Um, and if you have a problem with that, I'll just take your word for it, right? Like I'm not here to play gotcha or anything like that. Joanne, I will say that I felt that you were very engaged yesterday, and so that is sufficient for me in terms of evidence that you were here, you were thinking about ways, lots of ways that you could bring that resource into your classroom. It was really fun to hear from you about. I think you're the only person here that is actually a teacher up in Alaska right now, so fun to get your perspective from some boots on the ground. So we'll go ahead and get started this morning for day two of this virtual workshop where we're exploring data puzzle resources to think and learn a little bit more about ecological tipping points. We'll start today with just a recap of what happened yesterday. For some of you weren't here yesterday, so we'll fill you in. Others, perhaps a refresher is helpful moving into day two. And then we'll turn things over to Kristen to kind of build off of what we started yesterday, build off that question document that you all put together in your breakout rooms, generate some questions that we'll explore with some data that Dr. Megan DeMarche and her colleagues have gathered over the last few years. So we'll generate questions, explore some data, and then explore some new resources that I have just finished before this workshop. Literally put online this morning. So excited to let you play with those resources and get your feedback, see what you all think. I will say that at the end of day two today, we'll have another survey, and it's in that survey where you'll indicate to Elise and I whether or not you are seeking an 8-hour professional development certificate for being here today, or one graduate credit from CU Boulder. So at the end of the workshop today, there'll be that survey. That's where you'll indicate what kind of prize you're looking for being here for these 2 days, and then we'll send you off in that way. So I'm gonna share my screen here, do a quick recap. Elise, was there a question in the chat that I maybe missed? I'll dig into it myself. So wanted to just start with a recap from yesterday. Real simple. Data Puzzles is a resource, a product that was born out of our work with an Arctic expedition. This Mosaic Arctic expedition, we were fortunate to get to work with teachers across the country, supporting them and connecting their students to this Arctic expedition, bringing Arctic data sets into their classroom. These teachers wanted more, and so I was fortunate to work with Dr. Melissa Bratton, a co-author of Ambitious Science Teaching, to develop this data puzzles framework, which combines classroom-friendly data sets with these ambitious science teaching practices to support students in making sense of phenomena. Using this framework, we've developed, there was a little bit of back and forth on this last year. Was it, yesterday, was it 11 data puzzle lessons or 13 data puzzle lessons? The confusion was because I sent out two separate scavenger hunt surveys. Sorry about that. We've used this structure to develop 13 different data puzzle lessons, which represent really highly scaffolded lessons that lead students through some background information about a science investigation. They pull out some science ideas about that investigation, make predictions, and then analyze a data set to test or refute their predictions. It ends in a final evidence-based explanation. So the structure that you see on the screen here is the same structure that each of the 13 data puzzle lessons follows. And yesterday we engaged with each of these four practices in the context of the tipping point data puzzle lesson. So we began with this eliciting students' ideas practice about an opening scenario. And that opening scenario challenged students to think about why, when they go to the doctor's office, they get their vital signs measured each time, and then consider how what a doctor might look for if you brought a plant to the doctor's office. How could you measure whether a plant was healthy or not? We use that to introduce the plant doctors who do just that, Megan, Bill, and Dan, who've been doing this sort of work with Moss Campion for more than 20 years. And then we sent you all into this interactive puzzle plot text to learn more about the scientific research, the investigation being conducted by Megan, Dan, and Bill. You all made some predictions about an investigative question from that text. How is moss campion reproduction affected by temperature? And then we went into some data analysis practices to test predictions you made, looking at a data set where we looked at reproduction rate versus average July temperature. And we saw that as temperatures increased, average July temperatures increase, reproduction rates also increased up to a certain point, a certain temperature, a tipping point beyond which reproduction rates declined pretty dramatically. Putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, from eliciting ideas, the text, the data set, you were tasked with constructing a final model to explain that question: how might moss campion reproduction be affected by temperature? And some of your models likely looked like this, where we had a few fruits being produced at lower temperatures, a lot of fruits being produced in kind of these middle temperatures, and then few fruits again at these higher, more extreme average July temperatures. So representing the data set visually in this final explanatory model. Through all of this, you all generated some really awesome questions that we captured in a question document. Dr. Megan DeMarche, who's a featured scientist in this text, in this data puzzle, joined to talk a little bit about her work and answer some of your questions, not all of your questions. So we're fortunate to have Megan join us again this afternoon so we can learn a little bit more about her work and her process. But some of those questions that you all came up with yesterday, we'll be able to explore before Megan arrives by analyzing some data sets on our own. And then so it's with that context that I would like to introduce Kristen Hunter Thompson, who was here yesterday, who's joined on a couple of other data puzzle webinars in the past. Her company DataSpire, she works as a consultant to help folks like myself, help educators bring different data analysis practices into their classroom. And she's super skilled. I'm really fortunate to get to work with and learn from her. And I hope you all enjoy the next couple hours where she leads us through some pretty innovative stuff. So, Kristen, I'll turn it over to you. And maybe I'll stop sharing so that you can take control. Does that work?
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right.
Um,
Thanks, Kristen.
Hi, everyone. It has been so fun to play along and see all the great questions that you've been generating in the chat and in the resources and all things like that yesterday. John, thank you for the introduction. We are going to be diving into data and thinking about data and playing with data. Absolutely about Moss Campion and this incredible system that we are thinking about and have been working with for the last day. But it is the morning. It is various times in the morning for most of us, though there was someone joining in from Germany yesterday. And so not morning for that individual. We crossed so many time zones, it's really impressive. And so I want to kind of like slow us in to thinking about data and get to know you all a little bit more. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to kind of co-construct some visualizations together. And so I have 5 questions for you that I'm going to ask you to answer. And in just a moment, I will show you how to get to this Jamboard and how we're going to answer each of these questions. But so 5 questions, answer about each of yourselves individually, and then we will move forward and sort of see what happens. So let me get to a place where I can see what you can see. So we are on our syllabus for today. So at the top of page 4 is this button here for the Jamboard. If you click into there, and before you all tell me, sorry, I should have done this while John was talking, but I just got so excited by the day 1 recap. I forgot to change over the settings. So now you all should be able to jump in and be able to access this. So as I said, each board is one of those questions. So you're going to jump in here. How many cups of your preferred morning drink have you had today? Okay, so I am 1 cup of coffee in, and then you're going to go over to the next board. There's so many things on my screen right now. And then how many years have you been teaching, working in education? Grab a dot, pull it up. We're going to create this as sort of from this line up, and then over to the next one. Hopefully you can kind of see how this rolls. So as you guys are jumping in, you can jump in and start adding your responses for each question. The one that I do want to just kind of draw your eye to, it's the next one on page 4. So what is the predicted high temperature today for your town? So wherever you are sitting, you're gonna want to grab one of these sticky notes. If there aren't any more sticky notes, then good old Jamboard, just make yourself your own sticky note. And this is going to require, using your device, or if you have a thermometer at your desk where you're sitting, or in the room that you're sitting in, or pull up on your computer. And I'm just going to ask that you pull it up. So for me, it's 83. So I would add 83, and then I would drop my sticky note into the bin that it falls into. So this page 4 just requires a little bit more to answer. And then page 5, as our anonymous, whatever this animal is, has already done sort of grab there. So I'm going to stop screen sharing so that you all can get in and access the Jamboard, and we can put all of our bits in. I see a request for the link for the Jamboard in the chat. So let me put that directly into the Zoom chat in case that is helpful for you all. Excellent, excellent. Okay, let me know if there are any problems as you're going through, as we're adding our spaces. This is so fun. It's looking great. Thank you for whoever is adjusting the sticky note size on page 4 so we all can fit in onto that histogram. Love crowdsourcing. Excellent. We'll take another 30 seconds or so. The animals are moving through the boards. Looking great. Fantastic, fantastic. Okay, let's see what we got across our community. Okay, you guys can see these too, but I'm just gonna screen share so we can all see in the same space. We have a lot of coffee drinkers, or at least we have a lot of coffee drinkers this morning. Excellent. So many of us, even those of us that are drinking tea and other drink soda, we're sort of, it's still relatively early for most of us. We're kind of at our 1 to 2 drinks hanging out there across us. Some of us haven't yet had our preferred morning drink. This is incredible, the distribution that we have across this call. And this was really coming through yesterday with all of the fantastic questions and strategies and supports that you all were providing and suggesting and jamming on together. That was not meant to be a pun, that we're in a Jamboard. And so for those of you that are the dots up here, I just want to say thank you for your many years of service. Thank you for what you bring, what you're contributing to this community here in this space, as well as in your school, your district, your organization, wherever your situation is for your learning. For those of you that are our 2 dots here, welcome. We are so excited to have you in the field. It gets easier. You have hit us at a really strange moment for our field. We are starting to lessen out the wacky wobbles of the last 5 years, but we are just so excited to have you. And notice there is a wealth of information and experience with you on this call. So I encourage you, just like we were doing yesterday, continue to reach out to each other and connect with one another about all different things that we are connecting on. Now, this is great. While some of us are consuming, more beverages, the longer we're here, we actually seem to have this we kind of go up and then we come down again. So for those of you that are brand new to the field, no worries. We will not be needing to consume many, many more morning beverages as you go along and continue with us in the field, keep working in education. There are some groups that I work with where this is a lockstep positive relationship up. That does not seem to be the case for our group. So that is exciting to see. This is always fun to see where we're at. Some of us are in a heat wave, though that is starting to finally kind of die down a bit in our country, but it seems like many of us are kind of hanging out around here. And this is, wow, such an incredible histogram of lots of different numbers, the different temperatures. When we range, it looks like from quick look, we range from 70 to 95 degrees that we will be spanning today as we are together on this call. And then last but not least, we've got many of us feel that we're sort of from like to fairly confident and comfortable helping our students make sense of new data sets as we are jumping in. Some of us are feeling a little less comfortable with that. That's totally fine. Some of us feel like we are just like nailing it and totally knocking it out of the park as we are helping our students make sense of new data sets. And this one I wanted to ground us with as we kind of step into where we are going for the rest of today, where we will be building off of the data that we were talking about yesterday and expanding it and looking at a new data set that's related but slightly different. And so we're kind of stepping into this new sphere. We're kind of moving out of whatever, we're building off the comfort we built yesterday, and then we're kind of pushing into that learning edge a little bit more with our new data set. And for some of us, we love that space of getting like pushed into new things. And we love taking our students into new things. And some of us are a little like, not so much, it's a little more scary. Wherever you are along that spectrum, that's exactly where you should be. Hopefully throughout the day, we'll be able to share a couple strategies. I've got a couple different strategies that I'm sharing out that you can use with this data set resource that John and Elise have pulled together for you all, or any other data set, data visualization unit, things like that you have in your curriculum. So we've tried to pack today to both hand you a ready-made resource and talk through a couple other strategies to go along and things that you can bring into your classroom. Before I give a little bit of context about this Jamboard and what we just did and kind of jumping further into data sets and looking at data, any other observations folks had from looking at our group as a whole as we were co-constructing those visualizations together that you want to bring up, or comments about co-constructing graphs together? And you can drop that in the chat or you can unmute, whatever feels most comfortable for you.
Well, I know what a couple of people commented on is the fact that Jamboard is going away. I know I used it a lot during COVID and then even in the classroom afterwards. And so and I know some of us, we can't just use things if it's not approved by the county. And so I know one of the ones that's supposed to replace Jamboard hasn't yet been approved by the county. So what suggestions for this type of thing? I know someone mentioned like doing something with Google's, but I know I've never used Pear Deck, but what sort of other ideas do you have for something like Jamboard?
Yeah, so that is a great question. I love Jamboard and I'm going to use it every single day until October when they sunset it. I am so sad that Google is sunsetting Jamboard. So right there with you. The what to use, Don, you totally hit the nail on the head of it depends on what's approved by your county or your district or your state, or in whatever situation you are in, the level of approval varies for all of us across the country. So I do know that many folks are thinking about using Pear Deck, or a good number of folks that are using Padlet. I am planning to use a lot of just Google Slides and shifting over to Google Slides from the way that I use Jamboard, because Google Slides are not going away. And we can sort of set a background image the way we can in Jamboard. Some of the functionality doesn't work as well in Google Slides. It looks like your colleagues I see Padlet coming through. Google has a whole host of suggestions like Mirio and other like Coggle, other pieces. They often require a subscription. I was working with a bunch of teachers 2 weeks ago, and there were a couple that were talking about using Canva, because Canva was something that was approved in their district for making slides and infographics and visualizations, and Canva has recognized that Jamboard is going away, and so they have also been adding a whiteboard feature. I would really suggest that you all kind of do a bit of crowdsourcing in the Zoom chat, because I think at the moment the answer is, how can we kind of crowdsource a long list? Because Dawn, just as you said, it's dependent upon kind of when things get approved within our districts, and there are different options. Well, it looks like Cherish is also thinking about using Padlet, as well as Alex, different pieces like that. That wasn't the like awesome, easy black white answer I would love to give you, Dawn, but hopefully that spurred a couple ideas, and we can get a couple more running in the Zoom chat. Awesome. Joni saying, I thought it could be interesting to discuss to see if coffee correlation was actually related to age versus years in the classroom. Ooh, I love it. I was not going to ask you your age first thing in the morning, but that is totally a great extension that we could do from this, you know, from this activity, from this Jamboard, something like that. One thing that I do want to share is we were talking about different technology ways that we could replicate this activity, and you can go analog. Let me just take a quick step back and say that this was inspired by the Dear Data project. And if anybody's familiar with the Dear Data project, it was an incredible project about 10 years ago now that 2 professional data visualizers did, where they, excuse me, collected information about their lives. Each week they would come up with a question, and then they would collect data about their lives, and then they would put it in a postcard. So one side of the postcard was the data visualization, and then the other side was, this is the legend. I mean, they're professional data visualizers. These were complex, like multi-part legends that were going on. And then the address, right? And so part of the fun of the postcard and of the Dear Data project is that while it got a bit complex because they were professional data visualizers, it had to stay contained to one postcard for the full data visualization, and then a half a postcard for that legend. So it couldn't get too complicated. The other thing that I love about it is that there are no straight lines. There's no grids. There's no bar charts made by Google Sheets. This is a way that we can kind of expand our students' understanding of what does it mean to visualize data. We can get into a box of thinking data visualizations, graphs, charts, maps need to look a specific way. And for some of our students, kind of opening this up can be a great engagement and a kind of invitation in as they are working with data and thinking about data visualizations. And so Dear Data was the Dear Data project was this initial thing. And then a couple years later, what I was showing you there on the screen as well, that's on the slide, is a picture of this book, Observe, Collect, Draw, that Georgia and Stephanie put together, where they put together suggestions of what are questions you can ask. And there are some fantastic ideas of questions that we can ask our students about themselves, about their lives, helping them think about collecting some data and different pieces like that. Veronica, I see your hand. I'm going to share a few more slides, and then I'm going to circle back to you in just one second. But as I said, we can go analog. So we were doing this in Jamboards. We can do it with stickies, like stickers. We can do it with sticky notes to make our histograms of different things. This, we were actually measuring our core temperature, not the outside temperature. We can build with manipulatives. And so many of us often think that our manipulatives live in the wonderful land of elementary school. And I know, as John was saying yesterday, our data puzzles are largely for our middle school and high school classrooms, which is fantastic. And I just want to put a stake in the ground that there is a lot of benefit that can come for our middle school and our high school. It gets them thinking in a different dimension. We can also physically move our bodies in space to represent data and think about data representation, especially when it's about ourselves. That helps us with that understanding the representational nature of data, but also, especially for our older students, getting them to represent something that is not themselves is a helpful connection for the analyzing and interpreting data piece of kind of wrapping around what is it I'm actually looking at. Or like the Dear Data project, students can build out their own visualization of the data of what they're looking at. So there's a variety of different ways that we can get our students co-constructing, building visualizations about things about themselves in ways that don't take a lot of time and help them get at practicing visualizing data, practicing thinking about data representation, and starting to make meaning, looking at the data. And they often don't even realize they're doing it because they're just answering questions about themselves. And so this is one of the strategies that I want to kind of share out and leave with you all. I think it's a fun way as we're kind of grounding into day 2. We've got 4 hours under our belt. We got another multiple hours coming with us on Zoom. So I thought it could be kind of a fun way to start, but also wanted to share out as this is a strategy to help students think about visualizing data from a different perspective, from a different angle that you can take and use in whatever way you want. It can be a do now, it can be an exit ticket, it can be a beginning of the school, a coming after a vacation, every Friday we're gonna do some data, whatever. There are many different ways that you can take this. Okay, Veronica, you've been waiting a long time, so I'm coming back to you, and then we'll see what else is coming up in the chat.
Okay, so when you first clicked, when I clicked on the link, it started with question number 6. Okay. And so as I went backwards, the 3 questions were easy because it was just a number line. But I didn't notice when I hit the first 2, I think it was, that there was a y-axis. And so wherever I put my dot, I had no idea that there was a y-axis. And then I couldn't figure out which was my square, which was my dot. So I didn't want to change anything. So I just wanted to mention that, like, I've used the sticky note ones so that if the students did like me and made a mistake or didn't actually understand where they were supposed to put it, they could then move it somewhere else. And then when we've used the you know, on the internet, you know, they could identify themselves. Like I think I had them put their initials on it or whatever so that they could identify it if they needed to move it. So that was a comment on.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Stuff. Yeah, in terms of kind of the different realities when we're running these activities, and sometimes we make a mistake and we need to adjust it, and sometimes we want to be really mindful of which was ours so that we're not adjusting others. Sometimes we're just trying to like do something quickly. So thank you for sharing, Veronica. These are all great things to think about as we're taking the strategy into our classroom, and things sort of different angles, different components to think about. We did 5 questions. I would say I do not lead with 5 questions when I'm doing this with my students. I usually do 2 because 1, it's sort of, okay, so I taught 5th through 9th grade. Many of my 5th graders would do like however many I asked them to do, right? But by the time my students got into like 7th, 8th, 9th grade, if I only had 1, they would be like, yeah, I'm not doing that, Miss HT. But with 2, then that would like really get them up and sort of moving around the room, things like that. I often did it as they were coming in, especially for my group that was after lunch. I felt like this was a helpful way to kind of like ground them in. I would like stand at the door and meet them with stickers or sticky notes or whatever we were using that day. And so they're different pieces depending on kind of who our students are, their age, when we're putting it into our classrooms, different pieces like that. Excellent. So Kirsten's saying, can I steal this and use this? Yes, please. Anything. All the strategies that we are talking about today, please use them. I've put in extra references and resources, different pieces, all the things. So hopefully that is helpful. Dawn is putting in like how to get to observe, collect, draw, and that it is not, you know, I wish I could hand it all to you, but it's not super expensive. So if it's something you're interested in, then we can work forward from there. Excellent. John, Elise, or anybody else, any other things that that have come through in the chat that I'm missing, or other comments people want to bring up for this co-constructing as a way to help kids think about visualizing data from a slightly different angle?
I think you've hit everything that's come through in the chat. Okay. So looks good, Kristen. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay. Whew. With that, we've kind of landed a bit. And now we're going to think about asking questions. of our data. We did a lot of question generation yesterday, and we are going to think about kind of how do we kind of keep moving forward? How do we work with those questions and really kind of tie it back to what do we have in our data and defining our questions? But before we go there, that was a lot, we were sort of doing things and we were just talking, and I want to give us a spot to kind of think a little bit individually. So I've got this quote that I'm sharing. It's from Alberto Cairo. He is a fantastic data journalist in terms of bringing data to the masses and really thinking about how we help people of all ages and across all different walks of life make sense of data. And Alberto says, data doesn't tell answers, data leads to questions. So what I'd like to do is we're going to take about 3 minutes. I'm going to invite you all to pause, reflect on this quote, and then share in the chat just what is coming to mind. This is just kind of word association, free writing of when you see this quote, data doesn't tell answers, data leads to questions. What are some things that come to mind for you, your previous experiences working with data, our experiences yesterday working with the data, your students working with data? So this is purposely open, whichever way you want to take it. What comes to mind when you hear me say, data doesn't tell answers, data leads to questions? I'm going to stop talking so you can do your reflection. And then once you've done some reflection, share out in the chat. I invite you to share in the chat. What are some things that are coming to mind? And I'll leave this up so that you can see the quote. These are great. Let's take about 30 more seconds to wrap up our thoughts. Those of us still typing, if you have finished, I encourage you to look at the great comments your colleagues are dropping in. Awesome, awesome. I'm seeing there's so much here. This is just so fantastic. So I'm seeing things like questions that data leads to really helps focus research, kind of narrow down what we're doing. Thanks, Joni. Caroline saying, love the quote, students need for her to really push them into uncertainty. I just want to say to that. Yep, I see that I saw that with my middle school and high school students. I now see it with the undergrads that I work with. They struggle when I ask them questions and they just expect there to be an answer. Anybody else have that? Okay, I'm seeing Linda's head nodding, Madeline, Dr. Gordon. Okay, yeah. Laura, Carolyn, you're not alone. A bunch of us on this call are like feeling we've got similar things going on with our students. Matt sharing, data makes observations real. I love that. We were talking about kind of data collection can feel kind of off-putting for some of our students yesterday, but taking observations can feel more enticing, more inviting. Laura sharing, interpretation of data can be different depending on how you look at it. Yeah, absolutely. We can look at the same data set and come out with different interpretations of the data, not in a manipulative way, just in a, there are multiple stories we can tell from a data set. Evelyn saying data-driven teaching or responding to data are things that are coming up. Yep, in our field, we've got these two things that are like intertwined, our assessment data as well as real-world data like we were talking about yesterday with John. Anita sharing to understand what data is and how to interpret it. We'll have lots of questions, and you all generated tons of questions yesterday. In fact, I initially pulled them all into one document and it was over 100. And we just don't have enough time to go through 100 questions. So I pulled it down to a subset of 20. So I am going to apologize from the beginning if the subset I selected does not include one of your most favorite questions that you posed yesterday for the whole group. But again, while 4 hours is a lot, as we noticed yesterday, like it can go by really quickly. And so I pulled it down to a subset of 20 questions. And what we are going to do is we're going to kind of play around with those questions. But just as John gave us a kind of grounding reminder of what did we do yesterday, I want to kind of give us this grounding reminder of what data we were looking at. So this was the visualization that Elise was helping us look through. Remember, we had done that slow reveal strategy as a way to initially look at this bar chart of the data. But just kind of as a refresher, because life's in session and lots of things have happened since yesterday, we are looking at data from 3 states, Alaska, Colorado, and New Mexico. There are 4 locations across those 3 states because they're 2 locations in Alaska. And then at each of those locations, there are multiple sites per location. Everybody on the same page? There's a lot of moving pieces with this data set. And then we have 20 years worth of data. So these top 4, this is just like background metadata. We brought that up yesterday of like just generally what's going into these data, into this graph. And then we're looking at, we have information from July. We've got our temperature, right, John? Soil surface temperature, is that correct? Okay, so we've got the soil surface temperature for July, and they've binned it like across all those 20 years. Each year had July soil surface temperature. We took an average for July in each year, and then depending on where that average fell is which bin it got put in. And then we also had this reproduction rate, which was the average number of fruits per year per size of plants. We're going to talk about this reproduction rate a little bit more, but just sort of as a grounding back to what we are looking at. And then you all asked for a lot of other pieces of information about data, about components, about the system. We were asking about other months, air temperature. Is this air temperature, atmospheric, soil, ground? Precipitation came up a lot. Latitude, elevation, time of flowering, la 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 la. So like this is a list of things that you guys asked for. In a bit, we're going to be looking at a data set that gives you more than just a line. It's looking at the soil surface. So we're clarifying that that's the temperature we're looking at. We've got some indications of precipitation. We've got latitude for you, and we've got time of flowering. So while we are not adding everything on the list of what you asked for, we are adding multiple more things than we had yesterday that we were looking at. But before we get there, it can be a lot. It can be a lot to jump into a data set. So, and whenever we're working with data, thinking about data, there should be a question that we are pursuing, that we are exploring, that we're wondering about, because data is a tool. The same way written word, prose, is a tool to communicate a story or to communicate information, our data sets are just a tool. It's why I say the data doesn't tell the story, we tell the story. A novel tells a story because a human wrote it. Somebody wrote it. So it's that human who identifies the story. Or AI, which is trained on humans, wrote the story. So at some point, there is always a human. Data visualizations created by AI is always based on humans, right? So there's a human who's behind it. Some decisions are being made. And so this is why it can be helpful and important to think about what is our question before we jump in and just look at some data, because that can get to be really overwhelming for all of us. It's helpful to have that grounding. I forget, I'm so bad with names, but like someone was thinking of like, our questions can help sort of focus what we're going to be doing. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a bit of a structure, another strategy of how we can think about questions, identifying what our question is. You all did step 1 yesterday, where you were generating questions. So we're going to jump to step 2 of this strategy. Some of you might be familiar with it. We're going to go through the whole strategy, and then we'll talk about what it is after the fact. But we're going to go through this and use it to kind of help narrow our direction and identify some questions. And so the first thing that I'm going to ask you to do, so Elise, we're going to be coming into breakout rooms in just a few minutes once I explain what we're doing. So the first thing is that we're going to join a breakout room, and you will be with the same people for each step of this strategy. What I'm going to ask that you do is you're going to jump in and you're going to look at, I've got a subset of 20 questions, as I said. You're going to look through those 20 questions, and you're going to identify for each question, is it a closed-ended question? There's an easy yes, no answer, like yes, no, black, white, or it is very easily Googleable. Like, what is a thermometer? There's not a yes, no, like, well, I guess there is a yes, no question to that, but you could easily Google it. Did you go in July is an easy yes, no question that Megan could answer for us. So that we're going to kind of take all of those, like, is it easily Googleable? Is it easy if we just asked Megan or asked a scientist part of the team for the answer? Could they like quickly give us kind of a 1 or 3 word answer to the question? Those are going to be our closed-ended questions. Anything else that's going to require thinking, synthesis, decision-making on how we want to go about answering it, those are going to be our open-ended questions. So for each question, each of the 20 questions that you're going to see as a group in your breakout room, you're going to decide, is it closed or is it opened? And then what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to pick one closed-ended question, and you're going to revise it into an open-ended question. So how are you going to be doing this? Well, let me show you. You will be, let's see, too many windows open. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so let's go back to our syllabus. We are here, and we want to be opening up this shared question board. So if you click on that link, it again will take you here, and each breakout room number has their own worksheet. You guys have the exact same list of 20 questions, subset of 20 questions. So for each question, you're going to come through, is it open, is it closed, or is it opened? And then you'll take a question, let's say this one, and then you're going to put it down below, you're going to copy it below. So it's going to become question 21, and then you're going to edit it as question 21. Does that make sense? So don't edit it in 1 through 20. We want to edit it as question 21. Now, as Elise is opening up the breakout rooms and getting things set and ready to go, does anybody have any questions about what I'm asking you to do in this first breakout room? And if you're already into this Google Sheet, and John put the link directly into Zoom chat, thank you, John. Just hit refresh to make sure you have full editing access to it, so that everybody can edit it. Are there any questions of what I'm asking you to do in this first jump out to the breakout rooms? Okay, looks good. I will say in advance, we're going to join the breakout room for 5 minutes. We're going to do this mark and adjust. We'll come back. I'll explain the next step. And then we're going to go back into the breakout room for step 3. So thank you in advance for rolling with us as we yo-yo back and forth. This is so much easier when we're in person, but we can make it work through Zoom land across all of our time zones. So thank you with that. So with that, Elise, let's open the breakout rooms, and we'll see you all at 55 past. So you've got about 6 minutes.
All right, let me know if anyone didn't get the request to join the breakout room.
Kristen, I may have missed this. Did you point out that there are the different tabs at the bottom of that spreadsheet?
I did.
This is Anita. I didn't get the
Okay, great.
request.
Okay, Anita, let me see what's going on.
We'll see if they see it.
I
will send a reminder.
I think probably I was like looking at other screens and just missed that. This is really cool.
Caught mid-sentence. Excellent. Okay, so I want to explain step 3, and then we're going to go back into our breakout rooms, do step 3, and then we'll come back. So thank you for, as I said, for going with the yo-yo. So great job looking through, marking and adjusting the questions. Our next step is that we're going to prioritize. So what I'm going to ask that you do is you look through all of your questions, the original 20 that I pulled for you, as well as the additional ones that you added to the bottom, if your group was able to get to that step of adding some to the bottom. And I'd like you to pick 2 or 3 questions, okay? 2 or 3. You gotta like make some decisions here together as a group, do some teamwork. And that you think would be most interesting to explore from the data that we have. That I was telling you, like what I was showing you previously of there was the data that we had, and then I kind of gave you a solution to like what are some other data coming up. So like knowing if that's the world we live in, are those kinds of data, then what would the 2 or 3 be that you'd be most interested in? And so you're going to stay in the same tab for your breakout room that you were in previously, and you can bold it, you can color it, whatever you would like to do. To indicate your 2 to 3 top questions is what I'm going to ask that you do. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm seeing some no's and I'm seeing some yeses. Okay, so we can start opening up the breakout rooms. If it doesn't make sense, stay here and I'll explain it one more time before you join the rest of your team members in the breakout room. So what I'm going to ask that you do, so Elise, if you can open the rooms and those can join as they feel comfortable. What I'm asking you to do is go back to your worksheet that you were working in. You've got this long list of questions, the original 20 that I set for you, and then some of you added an extra question or 2 or 3, depending on how things went. What I'm asking you to do is look through this whole list of questions and think about, as a group, which would be the 2 or 3 that would be most interesting, that you would be most excited about exploring further when we jump into a data set. And then you're going to mark that by coloring it or bolding it or italicizing it, whatever visual indication you want to give for setting that as the priority, as one of the top priority questions. I took it away because I'm not in room 9 and I don't want to get in the way of their prioritizing their questions. So hopefully that helped as an extra step of understanding what I'm asking you to do. If not, I just encourage you to join your breakout room, participate in the conversations. Hopefully somebody else there has a sense of what I'm asking you to do. And if not, you can just have a conversation for 5 minutes with your peers and then we'll be back together. Okay. And John, do you want to pause recording? Sorry, this is an annoying. Excellent. There's a few more seconds before everybody gets forced back into the room. Here they come. Here's the waterfall effect of everybody coming back, whether or not they wanted to. Excellent, excellent. Good to see you all. Welcome back. We've got one more step. Okay, this is step 4, and then I promise we'll talk about this strategy. And this we're going to do individually, so no more yo-yoing back out to the breakout rooms. Thank you for rolling with that technology and all the hiccups that it comes with. So I've got 2 questions for you to think about, to reflect on. You can reflect on both, you can respond to both, or you can respond to just one, whichever sort of floats your boat, whatever is of interest to you. So the first question is, how did this process of looking at a bunch of questions, like we generated questions, we then identified if they were closed or opened, and then adjusted a closed one into an opened, and then we looked through our whole list and we prioritized what we would want to explore. So that is what I mean by the process. How did this process help you think about prioritizing questions before looking at data? Or question 2 is, how did it, again, the process, help you think about starting a data exploration? So just like we did earlier with our individual reflection, we're going to take a few minutes to do this individually. You can respond in the chat just with number 1 or number 2, whichever you're responding to. Question number 1, how did this process help you think about prioritizing questions before looking at data? Question number 2, how did it help you think about starting a data exploration? I will stop talking so you can think and you can write, and then we'll open it up to some discussion and some comments about the strategy before we take our first break. So it's coming in just a few minutes. This looks great. Let's take about 15 seconds to kind of finish up whatever sentence you are typing, adding in. If you're done, again, I encourage you to read through what your colleagues are sharing out in the chat. We've got some fantastic reflections here about this process of generating, marking, adjusting, and then prioritizing. In terms of Kelly saying it helped think about what questions are going to be interesting to think about rather than just first questions that pop to mind. Ooh, Kelly, that's such a great way to talk about that piece. Linda's commenting on prioritizing the question you want to answer leads you on a pathway to what data is most important to focus on. Yes, and especially as we are adding more to our data set, there are more pieces there. So Linda, I love that sort of thinking about this, how kind of prioritizing is kind of giving us that pathway forward. Jenna was saying the process helped to think about the many questions you could answer, which then like gets you excited and energized and jazzed about things. Awesome. I love it. Excellent. Okay, so many more than I can actually kind of call out or read all at once. Would anybody like to jump in and share something that they were thinking about that you put in the chat or that you've seen a colleague put in the chat? You want to get your voice into this conversation, thinking about this process?
I had something.
Prioritizing questions. Yeah, Alex.
So my group and I were we were kind of talking about the productive struggle that we went throughout this, and I am curious to hear from other groups. I've done this strategy with my students before, and they also really productively struggled through it, kind of talking through what they thought, how you could interpret different questioning strategies. So I'm curious, one, to hear if other groups experienced that, and two, like just kind of what you have experienced through delivering this strategy that has kind of aided in students being able to like think about their questioning in that way.
Those are great questions, Alex. I'm going to open it up for the first group for your first part of your question, but just to make sure we're kind of all norm setting and understanding what you mean, can you just elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by productive struggle in terms of going through this process?
So I think like there was not a clear cut on some of the questions that we were trying to kind of decide whether it was closed or open. I don't think that there was necessarily like universal agreement, and we kind of had to like discuss and share our interpretations of how the question could be answered. And I've noticed that like I just noticed that that was a pretty common thing with my students as well. So but still I don't it was still like going somewhere, you know, there was still like learning and inquiry happening, which is why I feel like it's productive in that way.
Awesome, thank you, that was really helpful. So Alex's first question is, how did other people experience that of deciding if a question, each row question was either open or closed? Did they feel like it was more clear cut? Did you feel like you had to kind of like bang up against it, like, oh, we gotta like make some decisions here? Did you experience that? And if so, how did you all handle it? Alex, I'm paraphrasing, but hopefully that's kind of what you were getting at.
Our group did go back and forth on a couple of questions. Hi, Kirsten over here. Yeah. Not popping up. So we went back and forth on a couple of questions. There were some where we were like, well, is that really a closed question? And then we felt like we had a lot of those questions. And so then there was this like, are we supposed to make balance here? Do we have more open questions that we consider closed? And could we actually research that or ask somebody about it? Or is it something that digs a little deeper? So there was a little bit of back and forth on that too. But I think that's, I mean, it's great to have that conversation, and it's why we do it collaboratively versus just doing it by ourselves, so that we are like open, close, open, close, open, close. I don't know.
Thanks, Kirsten. Caroline, I saw you pop up and then, okay, now I see you. Did you want to add? Build off?
I was thinking myself, having used this QFT approach with students before, I didn't actually go through it all the time myself. I just threw something out there for them to try it because I tried to get them to talk. And I thought, oh, that's actually a lot harder than I thought it was for that reason. I think we already know something about the data because we saw data. So then we were like, oh, is that open or closed? Well, you can answer it yes or no. So let's call it closed, but maybe it's sort of closed and open, and we can make it the open one. So I thought, yeah, that I always thought that was a pretty straightforward task, but it's kind of not. But I like that term, productive struggle, because I've heard students go back and forth and almost start arguing over whether it is or isn't. And I'm like, just mark one down. It's okay. So I thought it was interesting to do it from their perspective. So.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Dawn.
Could also even be fun to pick groups against each other and say, okay, who thought it was closed, who thought it was open, convince the other, and see if what the different mindsets people have, whether or not they actually can get people to change their decision.
Veronica.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that like both of them have their place. I found by starting with the close-ended questions, it makes the students have more self-esteem. They're confident. We got these answers right. So then when you move them to the open-ended questions, they're more likely to give it a shot. And then Alex, I would like to tell you that one of the things that I was taught when I was teaching, I didn't get to student teach. They threw us they were like, you can breathe and you have a pulse, you're hired. Was patience. A lot of times we mistake the fact that the students aren't answering for the fact that they are thinking. Sometimes you got to give them an extra minute or two, and you kind of prompt them. Like, I don't know your style of teaching, but I would walk around the room and kind of ask, like, what are you struggling with? What term? because I would tell them you're looking out for things like what, how many, certain things that are going to give you a closed answer. And so you just find that one vocabulary word that I want you to change. And that gets them started. That's an easy way to start. Change all the what's to how's or why's, And again, it's these little successes that'll then help them to finally achieve that, higher order thinking process. And as you said, as long as they're thinking, that's progress, because that's what you want, thinking, not rote answers. So that's my.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah. Thank you very much, Veronica.
Yeah, I would just add, because the second part of your question was, what have I experienced as I have facilitated this? So I just facilitated this in this way for the first time ever, where I gave you all the exact same 20 questions, which sets up a really different situation, because you could, as Dawn's saying, pit groups against each other as, is it open or is it closed? Because more typically what I do is follow the sort of more typical suggestion of the question formulation technique. And if you all don't know what QFT is, I'll explain that in just a second. That's what we were just doing. Where each group individually is generating their own questions. And so while there might be some overlap in style or kind or like topic, it is very rare that the exact same wording of the question shows up across every single group. And this step 2, the mark and adjust, the one that you're asking about, Alex, the entire intention of it, at least is my understanding, when I went through the QFT training, is just to have the conversation. So that productive struggle that you experience, that your students are experiencing, that's the whole purpose. It's to get folks, as Kirsten was saying, to converse with one another and be in conversation. And so that's the win. That's what we're going for. I have found 2 things. 2 things that I will share is that it needs to be time bound. And when I leave it open-ended, it doesn't go so, like open-ended time-wise, it doesn't go so well. I pull you all back when about 3/4 of the group seem to have marked most of their questions and are like starting to think about a second question. And usually you all had 30 seconds. We actually sat here and I sang ABCs because that takes me 30 seconds to sing. And then we closed the rooms. I usually give about a minute, because it is amazing how much happens in that last minute when you know you only have 1 more minute to do things. So I have found that it can be really helpful to time bound this step 2 especially. And then this is a really small thing, but the drop down menu of closed open in the Google Sheet has revolutionized how I facilitate step 2 remotely for this process. And so I don't know if that, like an equivalent can be like different colored sticky notes that you're just sticking down or stickering, or like different pens that you're handing that they underline or circle for the different colors. But something about that colored drop-down menu has really shifted how it's gone on step 2. So in case either of those 2 pieces, nuggets are helpful, Alex, that is what I would share.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Facilitating.
Thank you.
So this is, yeah, absolutely. This is the question formulation technique. It is out of the Right Question Institute, which is out of Harvard University. They have been running this, they have been sort of refining this strategy for decades at this point, with all age of learners, from littles in kindergarten, like K to gray, actually like preschool to, octogenarians. And they have found that this structure of generating a list of questions, going back, having conversations about are they closed or opened, prioritizing your questions, and then reflecting on it is one of the best structures to get people generating questions in a group beyond just a question, a single question that's top of mind that comes to mind. Because very often those single questions that come up are often closed-ended questions. What's interesting, as I said, I've just facilitated this differently than I typically do, because typically you all would have generated the questions initially. I did try to put the subset of 20 questions somewhat chronologically in terms of how we were kind of going about our day yesterday. So there was a little bit of this chronology. But what's really interesting is that very rarely is the first question a question that a group will prioritize up. Often they're sort of one towards the top. You guys were a little bit different, right? Because you didn't generate this initial 20 from the beginning. But I just want to point that out, and that each group is coming up. There's some overlap. A lot of you are interested in latitude, but a bunch of you are interested in different things. And that also is one of the great things about this process, this structure, is it gets questions coming out, it gets them talking to one another, and it's a way to provide some choice or personalization into it. We are going to use these questions pulling forward once we come back from the break and we start diving into our data sets. But we have been going now for a very long time. I'm super impressed. That conversation like went in all these great ways and we had so many pieces. So I wanted to kind of create space for that conversation. But it is 20 after now, actually 21 after. So let's come back at 26 after to jump into some data. Does that sound good to folks? Okay, see y'all in 5 minutes. Get up, get a drink, use the bathroom, move your body around, whatever you need to do. See y'all soon. Just for those that cannot join us live. Excellent. Okay, welcome back. We are going to jump into this data set that we have been talking about a bit this morning, that we alluded to yesterday, different things like that. And we are going to be stepping into this data set using another strategy that you could use with your students, okay? And so we're gonna play with the data, and then we will take our lunch break. And after lunch, we will share out how this data set is packaged as a ready to go resource for you to use with your students. It is a data set that is ready to go for you all to use. And so we'll talk about kind of how do we use this and what is it like and different pieces like that afterwards. But we're gonna use a strategy that you could use to have your students sort of step into the data set so that we can look at some data. Okay, so right off the bat. So yesterday I made a comment that it would be really helpful if you had a piece of paper. Now, the reason why I say that is because I am a human who likes to take notes on actual paper. I like the tangibleness of it. I am also someone who likes to doodle. I don't always write out my notes in words. My brain thinks in pictures, which might not be surprising to some of you now that you've been with me for an hour and a half or so this morning. And so having a actual piece of paper can be really helpful. If you are someone that you like to type as you're thinking, great, type on your computer, type in the Zoom chat, wherever you would like. So this is a where you would like to do it. Choose your own adventure. But what I'm gonna ask that you do is we are gonna spend a couple minutes thinking about alpine plants. We lived in the space of alpine plants yesterday a lot with the tipping point lesson plan. So I'm just gonna ask us to ground in this alpine environment, that alpine tundra that we were learning about yesterday, that Megan was sharing with us about at the end of the day. And I am just going to ask that you think about changes, similarities, and or differences. This is pretty wide open, okay? And the two prompting questions to think about are, how do alpine plants change over time? Are there similarities and differences over time? And or, how are alpine plants impacted by their environment or by the environment? Okay, so pick which one is resonating for you. Jot down some ideas on physical paper, in the Zoom chat, on a window, in your device, whatever works best for you. But we're each going to take some time to do sort of a quick write. What comes to mind when we think of alpine plants changing over time or being impacted by their environment? Awesome. Would anybody be willing to share out some things that were coming to mind as you were thinking about alpine plants? You can share it in the Zoom chat. You can unmute so that we can hear your voice. But would anybody be willing to share some of the things that were coming up as you were thinking about alpine plants?
Yes, I could go.
Great, thanks, Randy.
So I chose the second question: how are alpine plants affected by the environment? I just made a bullet list. Temperature as it changes through the seasons, as well as over a long period of time, and how that affects both, atmospheric temperature, soil temperature, their growth rate, and precipitation and soil moisture, availability of moisture. Same thing, varies from the seasons to seasons or over time. Herbivores, insects, disease, pollinators, competition, invasives, how they affected human disturbances. That's as far as I got. So
great. And so it sounds like, Randy, you're kind of pulling from sort of maybe experience with alpine plants personally, some personal experience, and then also some like, okay, well, I'm thinking about plants and like, what are different things that impact plants generally? Is that?
Yeah, is that what wasn't sure if
that's perfect.
Or a question, but
yeah.
That's what came to mind.
Yeah, that's perfect. So like what was coming with mind was like either personal experience with alpine plants and then also kind of broader understanding, thinking about plants. That's awesome. That's perfect, Randy. Kelly saying what some things that were coming to mind for Kelly were that alpine plants are slow to change. They're long-lived. So some of those pieces of information we were thinking about plant sort of life cycle and structures. Veronica was saying, not only do I like to write, but I like to sketch. So Veronica sketched something that was treeless. And so thinking about some of those pictures, maybe, Veronica, that were coming to mind that we were seeing yesterday that Megan was sharing or that were in that data puzzle. Don, I'm coming to you in just a second. Judy was sharing that there are kind of many things that alpine plants might be affected by over time. Some things that were coming to mind for Judy were differences in human development, animal habitation, climate change. So Randy, there was some crossover for Randy. John, what can you add for us? What were some things coming to mind for you?
Mine actually started at me think of more questions because as knowing that temperature change could be pushing them up in elevation.
Oh, Don, your audio is going in and out for me. I think you're talking about elevation.
And at some point, you're going to get to the point where you only can go down. And so I'm curious, they're starting to hybridize when you've got sharks changing ranges. They've seen sharks that are being pushed out of their temperature range are actually starting to hybridize, and curious whether or not the alpine plants are going to also learn some of these adaptations or start to evolve some of these other adaptations or even hybridization.
Awesome. So John, your brain went to okay, so I'm thinking about this impact with elevation, things that Megan were talking about yesterday, and then jumped to, well, other species and other systems, and what are some of the things they're doing as their habitats are, or as they are migrating with shifting temperatures. So we're making connections between different things that we have heard and thought about and different pieces like that. So this is awesome. So I heard Randy say well, I thought that's what you wanted me to say. And I would say anything you came up with is what I wanted you to say. The intention of this quick write is just to kind of get us in the space and get us to think about it. I'm going to kind of give us a little primer on the data that we have. Now that we've kind of situated ourselves, okay, we're thinking about alpine plants. So as I said, we've got some more data for you. So the data set that we're going to look at today is different than the data set we were looking at yesterday. In today's data set, we only have data from one state, from Colorado. So from that one location in Colorado, and there are 4 sites in that Colorado location. We have data from 5 years at these 4 sites in Colorado. We have temperature from July, and then we have the average July temperature, and we have the average spring temperature. So before the flowers come out. We have the day the first flower came out, so timing of flower, and July and spring gave us other months that you all were asking for. We have day of snow melt, like when the snow goes away. As Megan was talking about yesterday, like that's this really important sort of proxy indicator of the amount of water, precipitation kind of in the space that the plants are using. So we do not have precipitation as a variable, but we have day of snow melt as this variable that they have found to be an interesting variable to look at in the system. We have latitude and longitude for you of these different sites. And then we have reproduction. And let me explain what the reproduction rate is that we're looking at today, because it is different than yesterday, as of now. So as of now, the data set we're looking at a site averaged reproduction rate. So in the sites, they go find the tagged plants. There are about 600 of them in the study. Those tagged plants have flowers. So here's the plant. They look for the flower. The flowers, some of those flowers produce fruits, and they count the fruits in the plant, the number of fruits per plant. We don't count the seeds. This was coming up yesterday. We don't count the seeds because they're so tiny and they're really hard to count. And they have already established that there are about 18 to 14 seeds per fruit, typically, for moss campion. And so they count the number of fruits. So then what we're looking at as the reproduction rate in this data set is for each plant, the number of fruits per year divided by the log of the area of the plant. And then what they've done is they've taken an average of all the plants at any one of those sites, those 4 sites. And that's what we're going to be looking at here as the reproduction rate. That was a lot of detail, a lot of context. If you want to talk about like the detail of it, we can talk more, but I just want to kind of give you a sense of like, this is slightly different than what we were looking at yesterday. But again, it's all trying to get at this, like, what is the reproduction rate of moss campion? And what we're going to do is we are going to dive into this data set to do some exploration of the data. And when I was asking you your questions for that quick rate, they were really broad and open, okay? We need to narrow it down a little bit. We need to narrow our focus a little bit as we are diving into a data set. And so I am going to say you have 2 options. One option, you can go with the question that I'm suggesting here. How does moss campion vary? Still a pretty broad question, but it is narrower in its focus because I'm looking at moss campion as opposed to alpine. I could have also said in Colorado at these 4 sites between 2016 and 2021, because those are the data that you're about to have. Or if that's not resonating with you, you can go back to the questions that you generated with your breakout room, find your tab, find one of these questions that you had highlighted, and you can explore that question. So this is a bit of a choose your own adventure. You can go with the question I'm suggesting, or you can go with the question that you identified with your group, okay? And then what we're gonna do is, if you jump into the syllabus, this moss campion phenology, this is the link that you want to have, because what we're going to do is we are going to explore the data set. We're going to each individually do this for 5 minutes, okay? If you click on the link in the syllabus, it will open you up to something that looks like this. So this is CODAP. This is a tool by Concord Consortium. It is called CODAP. We are using it because we can all be simultaneously playing around looking at the same data set in our own windows. So unlike Google Sheets, where for our question thing, where we were making adjustments in we were all in the same document and we could see what each other were doing. In CODAP, we all have our own windows, but of the same data set. So anything I do to here will not show up on your screens. So we get to do our own individual exploration. So we're going to do this for 5 minutes individually. You need to pick a question, either how does moss campion vary, or a question, and then you can interface with the data. This is the data set that we have, like I was just explaining. If you want to get some more information about the data, you can sort of expand this about the data section down here at the bottom. of it. For those of you that have never played with CODAP before, it is set up to be a drag and drop. So you can grab a variable and you can drag it over and then lift up and it will show up. If you want to add a map, you just come up here and click map. If you want to add another graphing space, you can click there and another graphing space will appear, different things like that. It's just a drag and drop, click and play type of interface. And yes, that is all that I am sharing with you at this moment about CODAP. So John, if you could drop, oh, awesome. Elise dropped the link to the syllabus in the Zoom chat. Let me just screen share one more time and show where to find how to get to this data set that I'm asking you to look at. So it's here, it's this Moss Campion phenology. Oh, but I spelt it wrong, sorry. Gotta love being dyslexic. So this is the link. Click on this link to get into this CODAP file, and you need a question. So either my question of how does Moss Campion vary, or your own question that you have selected. And we're going to take 5 minutes to individually explore and play around in CODAP. If you've got any questions, let us know, drop them in the chat. We're here to help. But we're going to do about 5 minutes of exploration. And you know what? I will pull up one of those awesome Google timers that we were using yesterday so that you can come back to this screen if you want to know how much time you have left. Okay. If you're having trouble accessing the file, let us know. Otherwise, have fun playing. Okay, we'll come back together in about 30 seconds from this initial exploration of the data in CODAP. Okay, excellent. Okay, this is the hardest thing to do. You guys are like all off on your screens. Some of you are like, I am done. I am moving off of CODAP. And others of you are in the like, oh, and this and this and this and this. And so I'm going to try to pull you back together. And because what we're going to do is we're going to open up some breakout rooms, and you're going to go back into the breakout rooms that you were in as we were generating questions ish, because things, people get dropped and people join, and we got to do a little bit of shuffling around. But in general, we're trying to put you in the same breakout rooms. And this is what I would like you all to share with one another. We set it up so that you can screen share. And I'm going to ask that you share out with one another, what question were you exploring, right? Did you go with this one of how does moss campion vary, or was there a different one? Did you go with one of the questions you had identified previously as a group? And then just screen share and talk about well, what were you plotting, or what kind of plots were you making? What variables, or as CODAP calls them, attributes, were you playing around with? Did you notice anything? Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. This is just free form, kind of helping, connecting with one another. What have you been doing for the last 5 minutes? I'm going to encourage you to screen share so that you guys can see each other's screens of what folks were doing, share insights, tips, frustrations, use each other to kind of see if oh, I couldn't get this to work. And if somebody else did, share out with one another. So we're going to open up the breakout room so that you can share with one another what you were doing in these last 5 minutes. And then we'll come back together. We'll take about 8 minutes in the breakout rooms. So we'll come back together. We'll talk about it a bit, and then we will take our break for lunch. Does that sound good to everybody? Y'all are rocking it. We're doing well. You're hanging in there. Okay, so Elise, let's open up the breakout rooms. If you've got any questions, ping us, pull us in, send us a chat, send some smoke signals. We'll come help you out.
I'm gonna have to move some of you in because we have extra people.
And Elise, I'll say a number of the folks that you're going to be moving in have kind of just joined after. So just a note that folks might have some new people in their breakout rooms.
Hi, Shannon.
Hey, how are you guys?
Good. How are you?
I'm pulling off kicks.
Nice. John, you're still recording. Do you want to pause the recording? Excellent. Okay. CODAP is cool, says Linda. Excellent. If you feel that way, yay! I'm seeing some finger snaps going around. Excellent. Excellent. Fantastic. If you don't feel that way, that is also totally okay. It's totally fine. We are using CODAP as a tool, as I said, because we can all be in it simultaneously. And because it is set up to help people explore data, Google Sheets is set up to organize data in spreadsheets and to calculate calculations from your data, like summary statistics, things like that. We have round peg, square hole it into a visualization platform, but CODAP, as well as other tools, are entirely designed to help you easily, quickly visualize data, iterate those visualizations, change them up, drag and drop different variables around to get in and sort of explore and play. And as John knows that I like to say, just to kind of muck about in the data, to kind of play around with it, and you can't break it, which is fantastic. And it is free. So that's the other big reason why we were showing you CODAP here with this data set. So what we just did, I just want to give kind of a little bit of a context of what we did. We started with a quick write to kind of ground ourselves in the content. For us, we have been living alpine plants and moss campion for quite a while at this point, and so it was a little less important for us, but for our students, when they're jumping into a new data set, taking 2 or 3 minutes to have them kind of broad picture think about a topic, to be like, oh, what we're doing, right? We're eliciting prior knowledge. We're just getting them kind of in the headspace of the data set. This was brought up earlier of like, we know the data. Like when we're teaching our students, when we're facilitating a learning experience, we know the content, we know the data set, we know the data visualization, we know the patterns we're hoping our students to see in the data, because we have designed that learning experience. For our learners, you don't know all of those things. So giving them a moment to kind of ground a little bit can be really helpful. The key is there is no right answer to that initial quick write question. It needs to be open-ended. Every student needs to be able to respond with something and feel confident of something that is coming up for them. Then we shared out some of the things, we celebrated all the things, we kind of crowdsourced our thinking that helped ignite maybe ideas when you were hearing your colleagues say things. And then I centered us in what is the question that we're going to explore and into the data set. What I want to say is that we have used the strategy to do 2 things at once, because you are adults and we can throw multiple things at you at once. I dropped you into a brand new tool and I dropped you into a new data set. So 2 things at once. I would not necessarily recommend that you do both of those with your students at the same time. But I figured y'all could handle it. So then I grounded us in a question. I showed us the data set, and then I gave you 5 minutes to explore it individually. That 5 minutes is really intentional. For our younger learners, or for our learners that are like just really quick to give up and really frustrated, you might want to shorten that to be 3 or 4. You don't want it to go too much longer than 5 or 6 minutes. The intention is that everybody can do something. They can open it up. They can look at a row, they can calculate an average, they can graph it. Ideally, they're not calculating averages. Ideally, they're actually like plotting the data. And then I put you all together to do some peer-to-peer sharing out. This creates peer-to-peer instruction. This is a way to get it out of them always looking at us for the answers in a data set, and to start looking to each other as ways to learn. This can be really effective when we're learning a new tool. It is very easy for us to feel like we need to tell them everything to do in a tool. In our drag and drop tools, our students are faster at doing the drag and drop than often we are. We often need like a little more comfort before we feel like we can jump in and start moving things around. But they then need the help when it comes to okay, but how do we get a little more nuanced and a little more detailed? So if we can get them doing some initial exploration of a tool or a data set themselves, and then talking with each other about it, that covers a lot of sort of those initial, we answered the same question 42 times with 21 students in our class type of thing. And it gets them talking to each other and sort of building that muscle of turning to each other. So then we can spend our time full group instruction, more targeted instruction, getting them to sort of dive into more nuanced places. Okay, a bunch of things were coming through in the chat as I was kind of sharing out on those pieces, but this is a structure, a strategy of a way to kind of introduce students into a data set and introduce them into a data set that they can explore and feel confident about it. Now, if we were wanting them to develop a specific thing out of the data set, now would be when we would pivot and we would say, okay, now I'm interested in you guys working to look for this thing in the data. So if there's a specific pattern or a specific relationship or a specific trend or something, now would be the time to kind of narrow that focus even more on that pathway. We've given them some time to do some initial exploration themselves, and now we're focusing down. If we want it to be a figure out a story, identify a story, now would be the time that we would say that. It would be more open-ended. You might get 21 different stories out of your students, or at this point you can have them do partner pair up with the data. That can be really helpful. And depending on your devices, you can do partner pair up at that initial 5 minutes as well, but no more than partners on that initial 5 minutes. And so then you could go in that direction. So at this point in the strategy, you have some options. There's some different pathways you can take it depending on what you're interested in. But this structured way into an exploration can be a helpful way to kind of build up students' confidence and get them making some of those decisions themselves, so that one, it's not a recipe book. So the moment anything doesn't look exactly like the pictures you have put for them together in your like learning management system or your digital notebook or whatever it is, they balk and they give up, because we're inviting them to take the driver's seat of this. And then two, they kind of have built some confidence of like, I can do data, I can play with data, and then they can go forward from there. One thing I will share is that a great thing to do at the end of this activity, if you're, so depending on which way you want to go, you have them go off and you do it, doing some sort of kind of group share out at the end. We're not going to do this right now because it's lunchtime and we need to get to lunch, but some sort of group share out of like, once they've gone back into the data, done what you want them to do, have them come back together as a full group and share out. It's a great way to kind of crowdsource, jigsaw, pull together different ideas. Sorry, I'm forgetting people's names. Someone was sharing yesterday that we could do like station rotation and jigsaw type opportunities. That's the benefit of getting this group full share out. And then having a time at the end. We started with a quick write, ending with a quick write or a doodle or something to create space for that metacognition can be really helpful. It can be, and these questions, this is in the slide deck, you will have these, are purposely open. This is not what is the claim you want to make from the data. This is about overall, what did we learn? If they want to say something about what they learned from the data, that's fine, but we're trying to get them to think about the learning experience of exploring data and things like that at this final quick write. This is always the hardest thing to do, right? Because we run out of time and we're like racing out the door because the bell is rung and things like that. But creating that moment for metacognition for them to reflect is another great way to sort of reinforce and reiterate, kind of reinforce, build that confidence and build their self-efficacy in terms of being able to explore and work with some new data sets. Okay, that was a lot that I just threw at you, but this is what we have just gone through. Sorry, is our third strategy of today, which is thinking about when we're exploring new data, creating kind of this scaffolded muckabout approach to it, where they've got these individual steps. And this is written out in the slide deck, and I'll write it out at the bottom of the syllabus with suggestions for times, if that's helpful, if anybody's interested in that as well. But so this morning we have co-constructed graphs, we have prioritized questions, and we have jumped into a new data set and thought about a way to help students work with the data set. We are about to take our lunch break. John is going to explain some things that are going, that you can check out if you want over lunch. And then Dr. Megan will be coming back after lunch to talk to us, to talk about her process of how she asks questions, explores the data, mucks about in it as she's working to make sense of it, as well as answer any questions that we might have. There were great questions yesterday and we kind of ran out of time, so we wanted to bring Dr. Megan back to answer those. And then we'll be thinking about kind of these resources more broadly. John, what do we need to know before lunch?
Thanks, Kristen. Before lunch, I think you need to know that I'm probably going to have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, maybe a banana too, if there are any left over. So it's probably what I'm gonna have. And you might also be interested in checking out. I hope you're interested. I'm excited about this. Is a brand new virtual field trip that we put on, very Elvis, that we put online this morning. I was very fortunate to have connected with a grad student at CU Boulder, Tyler Grimes, and with very little preparation, sent him up to Niwot Ridge, the Colorado location from which the data set you were just analyzing came from. We sent him up about a month ago to the day, actually, to capture some 360 images, to interview Megan's colleague, Dr. Meredith Zettelmoyer, who we'll learn a little bit more about later this afternoon. Basically, as a way to connect students to the field sites from which the data they're analyzing, or in this case, you are analyzing, come from. So giving the data points some life, I hope. So during the lunch break here, if you are up for it, we'd be excited to have you check out that virtual field trip. And hopefully that connects you to the points that you were just playing around with a little bit more. Let's come back at I don't know. Let's come back at quarter of the top of the hour, wherever you are. 34-minute lunch break here. 33. So quarter of, for East Coasters, that's quarter of 2. Mountain timers, I'm going to try to do some math here. I think that's 11:45. We'll see you in about 33 minutes. Thanks all.
Enjoy.
John, do you want to stop the recording?
All right, team. Welcome back. Hope you had a good lunch. Thank Madeline for the pro tip in the chat. Where were you last week? If I'd have known this last week, I could have avoided the same situation. I'm just kidding, but yeah, I hope y'all had a good lunch. We're in the kind of the home stretch here, the last hour 15 of the workshop. We've got Dr. Megan DeMarche ready to speak. I've sent, I kind of mentioned this yesterday. I'm like sending her a lot of emails about what we're up to, trying to catch her up on all the things we're up to. So uh, I've let her know we've talked a lot about process this morning, the process of generating and prioritizing questions and playing around with data. So she's going to speak a little bit about that as it relates to her work and how that showed up for her. And then we'll talk about the virtual field trip a little bit and the CODAP data set and all of the context and how all of those resources that we've engaged with, Elise and I and Kristen and some others have tried to take all of those resources and put them into one product that could be useful for you. This product called a puzzle piece. So we'll talk about puzzle pieces in a little while as well. So we've got a speaker, we've got some new resources to have you explore again, and then we'll wrap up today by spending some time individually and in breakout rooms, trying to reflect on all the things that we've done and what we're most excited about and how we could take what we learn and bring it into our classroom if we so choose. So all that said, Megan, here's the slide I had prepared to introduce you. So maybe I'll just, whoops, not share it, but show it. Because I thought, and thinking about all the emails I've sent you and all that we've done, we spent a lot of time both today and yesterday generating questions. Today, Kristen led us through a number of really cool activities for prioritizing these questions. We spent some time in CODAP playing with and exploring the data set that you and your colleagues collected during that 2016 to 2021 period at Niwot Ridge in Colorado. Spent some time identifying patterns, but it'll be interesting to hear from you about the patterns you've identified, how you make sense of the data, how you go about sharing those findings, and what questions you generate along this way. So really excited to hear from you about your work at Niwot, about the process. And Megan, I am not sure if you are going to want to share your screen or just kind of talk in this space.
Yeah, I always like pictures to help me talk. So I'm going to share just a couple sort of slides. Can everyone see this okay?
Yeah, we can.
All right. Hello again. Yeah, John, thank you for that introduction. I might steal that slide myself. I love it. Such a perfect encapsulation of sort of the repeat process we do. So yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit more, as John said, about the process really that we've gone through with this data. And yesterday I showed this diagram of thinking of the scientific method as an ongoing process where we're constantly reevaluating our ideas for how we think the world works and coming up with new questions. And every answer that we get, usually we realize we have 10 new questions, and trying to prioritize which of those questions can we actually answer and how is kind of a constant conversation that we have. And so, we often start with this first step of just making observations about the world. And so for the data that you all were playing with a bit this morning about flowering time, that was really motivated by this observation from our long-term study that we saw this tipping point in reproduction. So we saw reproduction going down with really warm temperatures. But, of course, in order to measure plants across this geographic range we're going from New Mexico, Colorado, 2 different sites in Alaska, within a limited span of time, we're only spending about a week in each of these locations. And often by the time we get there, the plants have finished flowering, and that's why we're able to count their fruit, so to get a measure of how many seeds they've been able to make. So it felt a little bit like a black box that we saw this decrease in reproduction, and we couldn't say necessarily why. Was it something about pollinators? Were the plants just making fewer flowers? What was happening? And so for that reason, that motivated us to start collecting some more detailed data about flowering and pollination. And we can't, unfortunately, do this across all 4 of our sites and be everywhere at once. So for this, we've really focused in on Colorado. And that was because at the time when I started this, I was at the University of Colorado, so I was local. And another motivation was that we had some local college students really interested in getting involved in research. And this seemed like a great sort of data set that they could help collect. And so what we started doing is going to these 4 sites that we have at Niwot Ridge in Colorado, and just measuring when plants started flowering. And even though these sites are located relatively close to each other, they're all on this ridge, they're in slightly different microhabitats that affect their climate. So for example, this site SN1 is on top of a really exposed ridgeline. It gets a lot of wind, and so it doesn't accumulate deep snowpack. So snow melts out pretty early, and it tends to be warmer and drier in the spring. Whereas this other site, SN3, is in this sort of protected little hollow, and it accumulates a pretty deep snow bed there. So snow tends to melt out a little bit later, and it's cooler and wetter in the spring. And so even with these 4 sites, we're able to get sort of a range of climate conditions. And then when we do it over multiple years, we see even more variation in climate. But I just wanted to show that the whole reason we have this data set is because of undergraduate students that have been involved in getting independent research experience and helping to collect these data every summer. And so to get 6 years of data, we've had a lot of different college students involved in that work. And it's just been a really fantastic opportunity to get to work with them. I also just quickly wanted to show, you all have been working with a fairly aggregated data set to make it a little bit more manageable. So I wanted to share what the raw data that we're actually recording in the field looks like. So for every individual plant, we're going out every 2 to 3 days and counting how many flowers are open on that day. And so this is an example for just one of our plants, number 408, what that looks like in each of those 6 years. And so we see this really nice curve where the plant doesn't have any open flowers. All of a sudden it starts flowering and it makes more and more flowers, and then it stops flowering. And so from this, we can calculate things like the day of first flower, which is sort of the variable that you all have been working with. And that makes it a little bit more manageable to think about analyzing or looking for general patterns. So with our process with this, I mentioned that we really start off working with college students, and after the first 2 years, we decided that we thought we could say something about how this plant was flowering in relation to climate. So we had 4 sites and 2 years, so that gave us 8 data points to look at average flower time against the timing of snowmelt for a particular site and year. And so we published this paper with 4 of the undergraduate students, Elijah, Lucas, Grace, and Ellen, that had collected that data over those 2 years. And this is the graph that's in that paper, where we have the average day that a plant started flowering, made its first flower on the y-axis, and then the day that the snow melted in that site and that year on the x-axis. And what we say in this paper is we say that, we see that this plant is flowering earlier when the snow is melting earlier, but up to a point, it looks like that relationship sort of flattens out as we get early flowering. And we speculated in this paper, well, maybe there's some limit to how early this plant can flower when the snow melts out really early. But luckily, we had another college student who wanted to continue expanding this the next year. So we were like, okay, we'll get 1 more year of data. And it ended up being a year with really early snow melts. So we were excited about that. And when we got that 3rd year of 2018, those are these diamond-shaped points here. You can see that our previous idea of this like being a flattening relationship was completely gone. And now it looks much more just like a straight line, really, where we see that plants are, in fact, flowering early, continuing to flower earlier when the snow is melting earlier. So this was intriguing. So we decided, let's keep going. And we had 2019, which ended up being kind of a late melting year. And we got 4 new data points out here. So we actually observed some of the latest flowering that we had seen so far in that 4th year. And at this point, we were addicted. So we were like, let's just keep going. And then we got this data set in 2020 that completely threw it out the window. And I think you all may have noticed this if you were playing around with the data, because up until this point, I was all ready to write a follow-up paper saying that, flowering keeps happening earlier with earlier snowmelt. And then 2020 ended up being a really, really early melting year. So we had some sites melting very early in the year, but surprisingly, they did not flower as early as we would have predicted. And in fact, they flowered at about the same time as kind of average. And this forced me to really think about what was going on in 2020, because it seemed like such a weird outlier year. And what I did is I went back into the temperature data, and I realized that even though the snow melted very early, the temperature stayed fairly cool all that spring. And so I started thinking about how maybe just using snowmelt was a little bit too simplistic for deciding how these plants are deciding when to flower, and that maybe what really matters is not only that the snow has melted away, but that the temperatures are warm enough. And that combination of snow being gone and warm temperatures in the spring is really what's triggering the timing of flowering. And so then we started looking more carefully at the temperature data. So we had 1 more year, 2021, which ended up being an average year, and just kind of continued to flesh out those data points. But because of that 2020 year, we started looking at temperature more. And this is a graph with a kind of complex climate variable on the x-axis called growing degree days. I won't get in too much into it, but essentially what it is it's summing the warm temperatures and also taking into account how early the snow melts. So it's kind of combining information about both snow melt and temperature. But I still struggle to explain what growing degree days are, so we decided it would be easier to just give you temperature and snowmelt to play around with because those are pretty intuitive on their own. But yeah, that's just to say that by collecting this data over 6 years, we've seen, we sort of learned that we needed to think very carefully, not just about snowmelt, but also how warm it is after the snow melts. So we did finally, just recently publish a follow-up paper using the full 6 years of data on this. And that's the data set that you all have been working with. But we are still wondering, why? Why is reproduction failing? And also, is the same thing happening with other cushion plants? And so some of the things we're really thinking about now that we don't necessarily have super clear answers on is one possibility. I just wanted to show this video. This was one of our sites in the early spring where plants had started flowering. We were out there collecting our data, and all of a sudden, this massive hailstorm started. And within about 15 minutes, this is what our site looked like. And the plants that had started flowering early because the snow had melted and the temperatures were warm got absolutely hammered by this hailstorm. And all of these flowers that it had put in the energy to produce were basically destroyed by this hail. And even after the hail melted, the flowers were all beat up and wilted and were not attractive to pollinators and didn't really produce very many seeds. So one thing we're thinking a lot about is this possibility that by flowering really early in the spring, you might be more at risk of these unexpected frosts or hailstorms that could be decreasing reproduction. The other thing we're thinking a lot about is pollinators. So this species is insect pollinated, and you might be able to see this bumblebee here just very quickly flitting around all these moss campion plants pollinating these flowers. They move so quickly, it's hard to really kind of track them. But in the course of just 30 seconds, it just hit about 6 or 7 different plants. And that's what we see with bees with this species, is that they tend to be drawn to places where there are a lot of open flowers, a lot of individuals of the same species flowering at the same time. And so one thing we've been thinking about is maybe flowering too early in the year, there might just be fewer other individuals around that are also flowering to be able to attract those pollinators in, or the pollinators may just be less available. So where we're at now is trying to begin to collect some new data to try to answer these questions. So we've just this is our second year now, started collecting flowering time data for 2 other cushion plant species as well, alpine phlox and alpine sandwort. And that's because these 3 species grow very close together. They flower at about the same time, and they're all pollinated by insects. So, you can see here's our moss campion. It's growing right next to a phlox that has 2 flowers open, and right next to a sandwort that has about 10 flowers open. And so we're curious, how are these other species changing their timing of flowering in years that are warmer or have earlier snow melt? Are they competing with each other for access to pollinators, or are they maybe helping each other by just creating a more attractive, what we call floral display, just a ton of flowers out there that might be really attractive to pollinators? And we've also started some experiments to try to understand just how important pollination is for reproduction in this species. So this is one of my graduate students, Emma Chandler here, is really spearheading this, where she's designed these little net cages she can put over individual flowers to make sure that no pollinators can visit those flowers. And then she has her controls over here that pollinators are able to visit. And then when she excludes pollinators, some of them she will hand pollinate and some she won't leave with any pollen. And so with that, our hope is to be able to understand what is kind of the natural pollination rate in this species, how important is that for reproduction, and how might that be changing with climate. But we're just at the beginning of starting to collect those data sets. So we haven't even started. We're still like entering the data into Excel at this point. So we don't have any answers, but that's sort of been our process from 2016 to where we are today.
Megan, that is so interesting to hear about from like start to finish here. Your 2016 work, 2017 work ready to publish. New findings, like just motivating and inspiring all the next whatever, how many years now? 8, 5, 6, 7, 8 years of work. And all the twists and turns. Really cool. Thanks for sharing that. That is like kind of right what we're talking about, this process of generating questions, playing with data, generating new questions. There were a couple questions that folks have typed into the chat, but if you have a few more minutes, I think people would love to ask a few questions. And one that came up was from Joyanne, who's interested in figuring out, have you found any specific climate change factors that are tying into what you're seeing in your study?
Ooh, yes, we definitely are seeing that those really warm years, those really early snowmelt years are happening more frequently now than they have in the past. And so, that's a very clear kind of signature of climate change. And I would say that's kind of the main one that we've seen.
Yeah, great. So like earlier snowmelt, warmer spring temperatures, and you're maybe not seeing that in this like 6 year data set. You probably need a longer data set to be able to see those trends. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. If we take just our 6 years and you plot, temperature over time, you don't really see a trend of warming just over that 6 years because it varies so much from year to year.
Mm-hmm.
But if we look at really long-term historical climate data, like from weather stations, there's a weather station at Niwot Ridge that started recording the weather in 1950. And so we can plot that, and that's like right next to these sites. And there you can see that over the past 70 years, there has been a clear trend of warming.
Cool. So I think perhaps you're in these 6 years, you can identify Moscampion's response to these different environmental factors and then project forward what you might expect. Is that kind of what y'all are trying to do?
Yes, exactly.
Cool. Great. Thanks, Megan. Judy is wondering if all these plants, the phlox, the sandwort, the moss campion, if they're all of similar lifespans.
That's a great question. We have just started collecting some demographic data on these other species as well. So that's the data like individual survival and growth and reproduction. And that will eventually allow us to calculate an estimate of the lifespan. We don't yet have enough data to do that, but they are certainly very long-lived. We don't know if it's 100 years or 300 years, but they're similarly slow growing. And so the fact that we see such large plants tells us that they also have long lifespans.
Great. Anybody else want to pop on and ask a question directly to Megan or anything else in the chat?
What makes you excited or love the research that you're doing? What's your high on it?
Oh, that's such a great question. There's sort of two things. One is that, these are just beautiful places, and every single year I have a moment like, I can't believe this is my job to be up here in an alpine meadow full of wildflowers. I feel differently when it's like I'm being hailed on, but it's just a beautiful place to work. But I think more deeply, what really hits me is just how long-lived these plants are, and realizing that the vast majority of these plants that I come back and visit every single year and measure were alive long before I was born, long before my parents were born, potentially even before my grandparents were born. And so it feels like we're really sort of being historians for these species. We're documenting what they are doing and how they are being affected by global climate change and telling their story. And I always feel really honored to do that and just recognize that, all of the things that they have seen in their lifespan, and many of them will still be on the ridge long after I'm gone. And so that really feels like a privilege to me.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks for your question, Shannon.
I have a couple questions. I was wondering, like, one is about the flowering of them. So do they just flower like one time a season, or is it kind of continuous or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. They will usually flower for about 1 to 2 weeks, but each flower is open for about 5 to 7 days. So there's a period of time where they're sort of continuing to open new flowers, but it is kind of a discrete period of time where flowers will start opening. They'll have a bunch of flowers open, and then all the flowers will be wilted, and then they're done for the summer.
And then my other question, and I'll just put the two of them together. My other two questions are about how, after they do the fruits and the seeds, like how the seeds are dispersed. And then if you're seeing like you're just seeing the reproduction rate go down, but if you're seeing actual adult plants like dying or withering or not. Those are my final questions. Thank you.
Those are great questions. So the seeds the fruit is sort of like this little capsule, and as it matures, it just opens up at the top. So it's sort of like a little cup on top of the plant with seeds at the bottom. And when it's windy or the plant gets disturbed, those seeds can kind of just fall out of the cup. But they're not like, a dandelion or other species that have adaptations for the seeds to really move long distances. As far as we can tell, they kind of just fall, and the majority of them stay very close to their mother plant, but some of them clearly make it a farther distance, and we think that's probably like snow melt runoff can carry them, or potentially even in the winter, wind could be really important. So we think that's sort of the majority of how they move. And then the question about survival, so I don't yet have the data for this because we have been so slow to update our analysis of survival. So we have all the data, but we just haven't analyzed it yet. But I have noticed much higher adult mortality rates, especially in the last couple years. So we haven't yet sat down and crunched those numbers, but it is a goal for us to do soon. But my guess almost certainly is yes, that we are also seeing adult survival going down in the same way that we're seeing reproduction going down.
I have a follow-up question real quick, if I can jump in for Megan. So I spent a lot of time up in Glacier National Park in the Alpine just last week. I just happened to notice a lot of the moss campion were flowering, and other ones right next to them, some very large, have no evidence of flowers or stalks or seeds or anything. They're just green cushions and with nothing on them. Can you explain that a little bit? Is that just, are they not reproducing because they're struggling, or?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and there's a couple different things going along with that. So one, they have to reach sort of a minimum size to start reproducing. So the smaller cushions usually won't make flowers until they're a bit bigger. But there is variation even within a population. There are some plants that are, like we've noticed when we go to a particular site, it seems to be the same couple of plants that are always the very first ones to start flowering at that site, and some other plants that are a little bit later to flower at that site. So we're looking at kind of the population average flowering time in these graphs, but there is some variation among individual plants in whether they flower or not. But also stress does seem to play a role. So we, just sort of noticed that plants that have been shrinking a lot, that have just not been doing very well, will make a lot fewer flowers, or may not flower in a year. So that could be what's happening.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you.
Megan, maybe do you have time for two more questions? Then we'll keep rolling. There's a question about herbivores. Are there any foraging herbivores up there that might be feeding on these plants?
There are. And that's another black box that we're aware of that we don't yet have good data on. But there are grasshoppers that can eat the leaves, but also can eat the developing fruits and the seeds inside, and that can impact reproduction. My graduate student Emma just sent me 2 videos. She's out at the Ridge right now. She has a video of some mites that seem to be eating the flower parts, and she's going to collect some data on how much that affects the ultimate number of seeds that those flowers can make. But she also sent me a video of a marmot eating moss campion, which I was a little surprised because I wouldn't think it's quite leafy enough to be that appealing to a marmot. But she saw it happening in action, so we know it at least is possible to happen.
And along those same line, I think in terms of like other organisms up in that space, do you see any invasive species in the alpine tundra?
Not so much invasive species in the sense of like really non-native and coming from a very different place. One of the biggest things that we see is just lower elevation species starting to move up. So sometimes this is talked about as like shrub encroachment or tree encroachment. So I mentioned that we can think of tundra as a place that is too cold, too harsh for trees to be able to survive. But as temperatures are warming, that tree line is slowly kind of marching up in elevation. And so we're starting to see shrubs and trees increasingly kind of encroaching onto tundra.
And Megan, these keep coming in. I may do a couple more, but then would it be okay if maybe we sent you a few questions after the fact to get some answers? This is just really awesome. I think what we may do for this is take your responses to these questions and create some sort of like frequently asked question document to go with these resources. One question that came through from Caroline was, do all flowers produce seeds, and how long between flower production and seed production?
That's a great question. So no, not all flowers produce seeds. And we have done some experiments or collected some data on kind of the fraction of flowers that produce seeds. And yeah, quite a few flowers do not produce seeds at all. One somewhat complicating factor that I haven't talked about yet is that this species actually has 2 sexes, 2 plant sexes. So some of the plants are female, so they don't make any pollen. And some of the plants are what's called hermaphrodites, so that they can make both seeds and pollen. And we know that female plants, on average, more of their flowers end up making seeds. We don't yet know exactly why. In fact, quite a few people have tried to figure that out, and we haven't found a very clear mechanism yet. But that's another thing that my graduate student, Emma, is studying for her PhD. So there is some variation in how many flowers actually become fruits.
Cool. And maybe the last question, in your work, have you found a correlation between like the growth of moss campion plants and the number of flowers or the number of fruits that are produced?
Mm. Well, there's certainly a relationship between size and the number of flowers and fruit. So, because these plants just grow kind of horizontally, larger plants just can make more flowers. And so that's one of the reasons why when we look at reproduction rate, we sort of control for the size of a particular plant because that's kind of by far the biggest source of variation in how many flowers or fruits a plant can make. But we have not yet looked to see if like an individual that grows really quickly in a particular year also makes a lot more flowers or fruits in that same year, although we have talked about it as something that we would love to do with our data sets. That's a really great idea.
Cool. Thanks, Megan. And I know I need to stop, but this is the last question. I can't let Diana leave her hanging. How much engineering design goes into the tools that you use in the field?
It's actually incredibly low tech. So we do almost everything with like a ruler. Like we measure the size of the plants with just a ruler. Fruits, we're just counting. We have like little clicker counters where every time you see a fruit, you click down and then it counts the number of times you've clicked. And we use sort of waterproof field computers or field tablets to enter the data, but often we're just entering it on paper, on clipboards as well. So it really is a fairly low tech project. The most technology we're using are for our climate data loggers. So those are little temperature data loggers that record the temperature every 4 hours, or we have some soil moisture probes that record soil moisture. But yeah, it's all things considered a pretty low tech project, and by far the biggest expense is just traveling to these 4 different locations with our research crew every year.
Megan, thank you so much for being here the last couple days. Megan shared her slide deck from yesterday with me, and perhaps I can request the same again for today. And hopefully the recordings of Megan's talks and these Q&As coupled with the slide decks can be a awesome resource for folks. I know it will be for me as well. So thanks so much, Megan, and you can expect to hear from me again with more questions from this group. And there's some interest potentially in some more speaker opportunities moving forward. So I would be excited to facilitate the connection between some of your grad students and team and some of these educators next year. So thanks so much, Megan.
That would be fantastic. Yes. Thank you all for being here and your interest in the project. Yeah, thank you for everything.
All right. We are gonna just keep this train moving. In just a moment, I'm gonna turn things over to Kristen for a minute. Thanks so much. This group is asking such awesome questions and being so engaged, and Kristen and Lisa and I are just feel so lucky to be here with you all. So thanks for your engagement. Really in all steps along the way here. We really appreciate it. I'm going to turn things over to Kristen to talk a little bit about some of the alternative graphing programs to CODAP, and then highlight a new resource and let you go explore a new resource that we're putting out. And during that kind of resource exploration phase, we'll also kind of integrate a short break. That'll be our last break for the day. So Kristen,
yeah,
I'm gonna just kind of turn things over to you. Yeah.
Perfect. So I just wanted to make a couple comments on a few things that have come up, and I was mentioning earlier, some of the reasons why we chose CODAP, and I just kind of wanted to put it in some context of a broader suite of things. So Google Sheets we have used. I imagine many of you are using. We talked about the Google Suite offerings earlier with Jamboard going away. I don't know if you all heard it, but as Megan was talking, she mentioned Excel, which is still also really largely used to organize and collect data. But there's a difference between organizing data and doing some calculations from your data and exploring it, visualizing it, looking for the patterns like we were talking about earlier, and trying to help create spaces for our students to do those things. So Megan talked about putting her data into Excel. I don't know if Megan is still on, but I am going to guess based on the looks of her graphs that she was showing us that those were made in RStudio, which is on the right-hand side of this list. It is also a free option. It requires knowing how to code, but that is an option for you and your students if you would like to use that. But below Google Sheets and Excel is this group of 4 of HHMI, Data Explorer, CODAP, Data Classroom, and Tuva. All 4 are built to help your students explore and visualize and tinker and iterate and change things around as they are making the graphs. The intention is that getting to a graph and exploring that graph and starting to do some early analysis as a middle school or high school level is there. Desmos, Tinkerplots, and Fathom are often used in our math classrooms. They have crossovers. Some in terms of the degree of how much they are basically graphing platforms, graphing calculators, or they are set up to graph our real world data. And then Tableau, Plotly, RStudio, Python, those are some great options if you know coding and or if you want to teach your students how to code. And so I just kind of wanted to put this up here to say we have gone with CODAP for a variety of reasons, but it is not the only option out there. And because we know so many of us use Google Sheets, what John is about to show you has the data both in CODAP, the way we were looking at it earlier, and in Google Sheets, if that's what you would like to look at. So I just wanted to kind of jump in and share a little bit about some different programs. If you have more questions, please reach out in chat or via my email. Happy to talk about graphing programs for your specific situation. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Kristen. Muted myself there. I would so excited about the big reveal of the puzzle piece, which is not necessarily a big reveal because I think we were outed yesterday in the chat, and perhaps I even promoted this a little bit in some emails to all of you, but we recognize that Megan and some of these other scientists aren't necessarily going to be readily available to bring data sets, connect with classrooms, tell their stories, bring their context and expertise to you all. And so we're trying to create this kind of open-ended data exploration space where there are data sets like the 2016 to 2021 data set that Megan and her team produced in a framework and a structure where you and students could play around with it. There's some context to the data set, why they're important, how the data were collected, some questions the scientists are seeking to investigate to try to provide some of that context, that information to make it usable for you, but wanting to create this opportunity to play with and explore data in context is kind of the vision behind these puzzle pieces. And so they include many of the ingredients in our more scaffolded, polished data puzzle lessons, but in a structure that offers you and other users the opportunity to kind of play with and explore a larger data set. So in data puzzle lessons, we've made decisions to exclude some of the variability to try to produce a classroom-friendly data set. But as you all experienced and felt there was some tension there, you were asking, why doesn't it include this? Why doesn't it include precipitation? What about this? What about that? And so hopefully these puzzle pieces can address some of that and give users an opportunity to explore some of the additional questions that they may have. So included in each of these puzzle pieces is an embedded way to play with a data set, explore a data set. In CODAP, We also provide the data set in Google Sheets if that's what you prefer to use or are more comfortable with. There's some context about the data and the people behind the numbers, the scientists. And then really the goal of this is to be able to connect data puzzle lessons to these puzzle pieces. So supporting teachers, students from this scaffolded, structured, kind of confirmatory inquiry that is the data puzzle lesson, more a traditional plug and play resource, as using those resources as a stepping stone to more open-ended data exploration, which is more realistic in terms of what scientists are actually doing. So I'm gonna take you to this puzzle piece page and then give you about 5 minutes, which isn't a ton of time, to explore this most recent puzzle piece. That is the Moss Campion phenology in the Rocky Mountains puzzle piece. This puzzle piece is a little bit kind of designed, intended to be used, again, following the use of that scaffolded structure tipping point data puzzle lesson. Zooming in here a little bit, here's what each of these puzzle pieces look like. Again, there are 5 up, but each of those puzzle pieces connect to a specific data puzzle lesson. At the top, there's a little bit of information about the data, the phenomena. We're exploring phenologic shifts in Moss Campion, some information about location and data sets provided. You can interact with the data set. This is the data set that you already played with in CODAP, but you can interact with the data set directly in the screen, the window here, just simply pulling data over just as you were doing previously. You have the option to enter full screen because this can be a little bit tricky just on a desktop. Beneath that data table, beneath that CODAP interactive, you could open that data set in CODAP. You could open this same data set that you see on the screen in Google Sheets. And we've produced a few graphs for using the CODAP file that may be of interest to you and posted those with some descriptions in Google Sheets as well. The virtual field trip that you played around with is beneath the data set, giving users an opportunity to explore and visit the 4 field sites that the data are coming from. And then beneath that, we've got some questions to consider. We always want you to consider questions and patterns for yourselves, but wanted to provide a little bit of structure in that way as well. And then some text about the data and context, why it's important, a little bit more information about phenology in the study site, and some different components about Moss Campion life cycle. Got some information about the scientists, data collection methods, and then at the bottom, different ways to support users in making connections between the puzzle piece and the tipping point lesson, and other resources that you potentially could be interested in exploring to learn a little bit more about phenology, this study, or other phenologic studies in the area. So all that said, wondering if I could give folks like, I'm going to do 3 minutes just because we're kind of running out of time. Kristen's posted the link to the puzzle piece in the chat. Give you an opportunity to just explore that puzzle piece. And while you're looking at that puzzle piece, if you could think about how you might use some of the components or information in this puzzle piece as like an extension to the tipping point data puzzle lesson. How could you use that? How could you connect this puzzle piece and the tipping point lesson that you engaged with yesterday? So as you're exploring, maybe keep that in mind. And I'll put a timer up. We'll do 3 minutes. Go play. All right. So again, we're at this point here where probably 3 minutes, not enough time to really dive in too much, but hopefully you get a sense of what's available to you in these puzzle pieces and perhaps can start to imagine how you might utilize some of the open-ended strategies that Kristen modeled and we engaged with this morning, making connections between the structured tipping point lesson and this puzzle piece as well. And what I'd like to do now is turn things over to Elise to get you all talking and thinking together about how you could take this forward, how you could utilize some of the things that we've discussed and engaged with today in your classroom in the next school year. Elise, you ready?
Yeah. I'm really only going to talk at you for about 20 seconds here. I would like you to talk to each other mostly. So today you've seen some techniques for open data exploration with your students, and you've seen these new puzzle pieces with open data exploration. And I really just want you to talk to each other and think about these two questions. What are some things that you could do to help your students engage in this open-ended data exploration in your classroom? What sort of teaching moves or supports could you provide? And then how could you connect this puzzle piece, what you just explored, with that tipping point, polished, scaffolded lesson? How could you make these two things work together? How might you integrate them and when, and some details? So I'm going to pop you back into breakout rooms in just a minute. We have a Jamboard. Yeah, there it is. Thanks, John. And there is one page for each breakout room. So you might have to scroll down if you're, 9, 10, 11, 12. And just get some thoughts down as you're discussing with this group. You can add a sticky note. Really just enjoy these last few days of Jamboard here. So I'm going to get these breakout rooms open and send you all there. And we're going to spend about just 10 minutes here because we're getting towards the end. So I'm going to open those now and I'll see you in 10 minutes.
Thanks, Elise. Yeah, and this is hopefully just like again, taking this forward, a little bit of metacognition. We've been talking at you quite a bit and throwing a lot of things at you. Can we slow down, digest this, try to take something away, take a few things away here and kind of outsource different strategies. This will be a living document as well, an opportunity for folks to check out one another Jamboards and see what other folks are thinking as well. Elise, are those Jamboards, I mean, those breakout rooms, are they looking should we just remake them?
Yeah, you know what? Technical difficulty. They have to close first and then I'm going to reopen because they got a lot of us left at lunch and came back and the breakout rooms got all mishmashed. Okay.
Great. So you can expect maybe some new folks in these rooms just because of the nature of folks coming and going.
Okay, everyone's back. Sorry, y'all. I need to recreate new breakout rooms. Got all messed up. Okay. Now you're in new breakout rooms. There'll be new people. Say hi and put some thoughts in a Jamboard. Should be all set now. Thanks for bearing with me.
Thanks so much, y'all.
Anita, do you need help? Oh, you're on mute. Anita, you're on mute. Can you unmute so we can hear you, so we can help?
Sorry.
Okay.
I got this. I missed the second invite. I think it came and before I could hit join, it went away.
Okay, yeah. Let me move you. I'll move you into room 4 here. Okay. There you go.
Thank you.
Oops. Jerry, did you get kicked out?
Thanks for sticking with it, Jerry.
Jerry, where were you? Let me figure it out. Oh, there she goes. Okay.
So I think we should give them as much time as possible in these breakout rooms.
Me too.
I mean, I know you said 10 minutes, Elise, but it took us 4 minutes to get into them. So
Yeah.
it's like, please don't pull them back. 10 minutes.
Yeah,
you said 10 minutes.
10 minutes from now.
From now.
Yeah, I think so. And then John, I can drop most things. I mean, the biggest thing is just to reiterate that like building kids' data skills takes a long time. It can't come through in any one data puzzle piece. This is just all part. These are all the pieces that you're putting together across the year, but then also actually across all 12 years of the K-12 system for them. That's just the important thing that I want to make sure comes across. And so I could do that in one slide.
I think that I'm not sure, like, do we want to do we could probably nix what's something you're really excited about that you've seen over the last few days, or we could just go from your message on that one slide to asking them to consider that. Because I think 85 and 86, me reminding them all that they have done is just extra minutes that we probably don't need.
Okay.
So perhaps we go from your slide to what's one thing in the chat. And as I don't know, what do you all think, Elise or Kristen?
I think asking them to put that one thing in the chat would be really helpful for us thinking about going forward, especially with the DRK-12.
Yeah, let's do that then. Can we go from your message?
It's good for them, and I think it's helpful for us if we can
totally
actually get them to put things in the chat in the moment, because I often find that's a little bit different than what comes through in a survey.
Yeah. So I think let's go from your slide. Which slide is it going to be, Kristen?
I'll just do slide 84.
Okay.
I'm going to cut out.
So wait. So they'll come back and we're not going to spend any time sharing out or like looking at the Jamboard. I'll just tell people go look at others' slides in the Jamboard. And then we'll go into 84. Or sorry, 81.
Sorry, 81. I took slides out.
Potentially.
Okay.
What do you think, Kristen? I mean,
I think, Elise, if you kind of welcome them back, and if you can take a quick look at the Jamboard and call out a thing or two across a couple of the boards,
okay,
then that can be a grounding back and a reminder of what John was saying before they went out to the breakout rooms of like, this is to help you get some ideas down, but also to crowdsource so that you can look at the boards of your colleagues and also spark ideas. I think we can use that as the kind of grounding out of the breakout room. And then I can kind of say this thing about data skills moving forward. Erica, Christy, and Katie, are you all good? Do you guys need help back into a breakout room? You're welcome to stay here. I just realized I should stop talking to see if you need help.
No, our group was short because somebody was in a meeting and somebody was driving, so we were very efficient.
Okay, well, great. Welcome.
I like it.
Hi. And I'm running around because my kids are here and driving me crazy, so it's chaos today. They were so good yesterday, and I was like, Mom, I don't need you to come over today. And then she came over today, and they're even more wound up. The dogs are wound up. She has a guest here right now. I'm like, what is going on? You can't win.
Sorry, Katie.
Oh my God, right. I feel like that's like Murphy's Law or something, right? Like it's just total.
I have no idea what's going on. I should have went to the library. It's okay. We made it work.
Thank you for
So
making
you guys
it
can
work.
talk. You guys talk, do whatever you're doing. I'm just here whenever. So I'll ignore you until then.
I think that's good. What do you think, Elise?
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds really good.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, Kristen and Elise, when we can do this in person and have this be a little bit longer, because we're rushing like this part a little bit, unfortunately, which is kind of a critical piece. So hopefully down the road, be really nice to have lots of time for this like transformation, going from this to the classroom. What are we looking to take? What are we excited to take?
I will say there are some awesome things in this Jamboard
Cool.
coming through.
It's an awesome group.
Evelyn, do you need a link to the Jamboard again? Or the breakout room? Or both?
Evelyn, you have persevered so much through getting dropped off. Thank you.
Here's the Jamboard, and let me
We
see.
could probably we probably don't need to go back to breakout rooms just because.
Yeah. I'll close them in a couple minutes anyway. Okay.
Yeah.
You're here. Welcome here, Evelyn.
I promise I'll take a look at the Jamboard and get caught up. So thank you for understanding rural life,
We have
Where are you joining from, Evelyn?
I'm north of Moscow in Idaho, and but I live on a farm, very rural.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's beautiful, but connection is terrible.
Yeah. Kind of nice to disconnect and be out in the middle of nowhere. That sounds good to me a lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a good excuse, but yeah, I just use my phone as a hotspot and then kind of sitting in a low spot. Yeah, just no neighbors. It's just really, really nice. So,
cool.
Just farm animals.
What kind of animals?
We have a herd of a heritage breed of sheep. It's they're miniatures. They're baby doll South Down. Not at all profitable, just so you know. They're super cute. They look like little guys. I turned my screen, but yeah, we had 80 last year. About this time, we started having a lot of predation, coyotes. Some wondered if even maybe cougars, but which doesn't really make sense for the area. But yeah, we've lost over 20 plus sheep.
Oh,
Yeah, it was pretty awful.
sorry to hear that.
We
Crazy.
also have chickens and ducks and everything that goes with that. Dogs, cats. I could hear them.
Well, we have a farm in my house too, and it's a cardboard farm from a couch that we got came in this big cardboard box, and my daughter's been home all week, so we've turned that into her barn, and she's got her miniature sheep in there as well. So I could totally relate to what you're experiencing up there, Evelyn.
To turn on my audio because, of course, they're gonna stop, but they've got this really low bah. It's hilarious, but of course they're gonna stop. Oh.
Well, listen.
All right.
Elise, let's close them up, huh?
Close it out.
Do you want me to share my screen? Or do you want to share your screen, Elise, and just do the screen? You can just do the screen sharing from here on out.
Sounds good. Oh, we were recording that whole time. So, okay.
Oh, that'll be good. Good content.
Uh-huh. All right. Welcome back, everyone. Okay. I just wanted to share some fun things I saw on this Jamboard that you all just filled out. I saw some good ideas about use the actual data to play or work with the data that was in the tipping point. After the main lesson, pick one data set, make your own graph. So I think that's for students, and draw some conclusions after that. So just wanted to remind you that this Jamboard is full of some really good ideas. Work in teams of 4 to create a whiteboard presentation on the secondary factor. So maybe after we're done here, take some time to peruse this and see what other ideas were out there for using these things together. And with that, I will turn it over to Kristen. Kristen, do you want to share or do you want me to share the screen?
You can share. That totally works. So John and Elise and team with a lot of scientists are creating these different varieties of resources. And so we spent all day in that scaffolded, really structured data puzzle lesson that is grounded in real world data. I saw that was coming through in the Jamboard, like having students work with real world data. And then these data puzzle pieces are a new kind of resource to try to help provide, as John was saying, right, like it can feel really like tight and awkward when we only have so many pieces in our data set in those data puzzle lessons. Like that's what we were, running up against yesterday. And so we've built out these data puzzle pieces as a bit more data, but they're not structured. They're not trying to get students to a specific observation from the data. They're more about exploring the data. So it's more open-ended. And what I just want to say is all of the suites of resources, the data puzzle pieces, these different strategies that we've been talking about throughout and that we've been kind of going through together and talking about, the slow reveal, the question formulation technique, co-constructing graphs, the muckabout, scaffolded structure. There have also been a bunch of resources that you all have been sharing through the Zoom chat, which we've been trying to capture at the bottom of the syllabus. All of these are a suite of resources that are going to help us build our students' data literacy skills. And this has been on the screen for a while now, but data literacy is a really big thing. It's the ability to collect, organize, visualize, analyze, interpret, and share data for yourself and other people to use and understand. So if that feels huge, that is because it is. Data literacy is like numeracy or literacy with text. It is a big thing that cannot happen in any one lesson. It is not one data puzzle lesson that is going to push your students to the edge where they will become data literate, but rather it is a suite of all of these different resources together as you're piecing them together through the learning experience for your students across a year and then across their full K-12 sequence. The same way with our literacy and our numeracy. And so what we just wanted to kind of end with is there are a lot of resources, a lot of things we've shared, and they're all part of kind of the full map, the full picture of how we help our students build their data literacy for the 21st century. So super excited to be supporting you and sharing more resources going forward. But this is just my at the end being and don't put too much pressure on yourself that in any one lesson or in any one puzzle piece, they're going to get it all, because they just won't get it all in that one piece. It's how all those pieces fit together across their full K-12 sequence. Okay. Thanks, John, for letting me share that right at the end.
No, that's great. And that was such a nice recap of all that we've done. And we're really excited about this opportunity to be here with you all. There were a lot of new things that we tried in this workshop that we haven't tried previously. And so we're excited to hear from you all, maybe in the chat in the last minute here. If you could type something in, what's something you're really excited about that you've seen over the last few days? And just great for us to see, and perhaps great for others to see as well. CODAP, CODAP has been a labor of love for me as well over the last few months. I've learned so much messing around with that. Yeah, the question formation technique. The open-ended stuff is really exciting and inspiring for sure. A lot of different ways to explore data now. Yeah. Dear Data Project. Cool. Ambitious science teaching. So real data, data analytics tools, pedagogical strategies. Joyanne with the local connections. I really like that. Lots of Colorado teachers here as well, probably potentially thinking about local connections and integrating the NIWAT stuff into their work. Puzzle piece, chock full of good stuff. Yeah, the scientists. We'll be in touch about trying to connect Megan and some of her colleagues with classrooms as well. And hopefully there's a reminder in that syllabus. I'll send out a follow-up email tonight that will include today's recording, but also you have my email, Elisa's email, Kristen's email in that syllabus at the top. So would love to continue to work with you in the future. So please use us as a resource as well. Yeah, thanks, Joanne, so much. And I want to echo that as well. Like I feel really fortunate to have developed this group of colleagues. So many familiar faces here. And I feel like each workshop we're all learning a lot together. And so I'm just really grateful for having you all in our little data puzzles family and look forward to continuing to do good stuff in the future. That said, couple logistical things. Like we go from like the kind of the thanks for being here to like, all right, we gotta do these things. So some of the bureaucratic stuff. I'll send all of this out in an email later today, but just so you have it here in the chat right now is the day 2 kind of post-workshop survey. In this survey, we're really interested to hear from you about a number of things, what you took from this workshop, how we could modify this workshop, other data sets you might like to see in puzzle pieces. Again, you explored one of 5 different puzzle pieces, so lots to explore there as well. And then really need you to indicate whether you're looking for an 8-hour professional learning certificate or a graduate credit from CU Boulder for being here today. We'll update. This is going to be a free grad credit, Elise. So we'll update the survey. It's not going to be a $90 fee. Megan and her team have funds to pay that $90. So this is going to be a free grad credit. It's awesome to get the free grad credit. There are a few hoops to jump through in order to get it, unfortunately. And those of you, there's a lot of experience in this space. Elise, could you pull up the link that I'm going to add in the chat right now? Once you go through that survey and then you indicate what type of like compensation you want, if you select the grad credit, I'm going to send you this form here. And if you could zoom in a little bit, Elise. This is a multi-day, multi-step process by which you need to first fill out this enrollment form using the link at the top. Once you fill out that enrollment form, you're going to get like a student ID number, which you're going to use to register for the course and have this department payment form that's shown on the screen as well. And then you need to follow the instructions as exactly as they're written in prompt number 3 there in order to complete the course registration form. There are always some challenges in this process. It's kind of unfortunate. It's a little bit of a headache, but I can't submit grades and give you access to a transcript for this course until everybody has registered for the course. And so we can only go as fast here as the slowest person. And so please feel free to ping me if you have questions. But again, after you fill out that day 2 survey, if you indicate to me that you would like a grad credit, I'm going to send you this form, and you need to follow the instructions in this form to first register for the course. Once everybody's registered, then I can submit grades of a passing grade, and that would open you up and allow you to download a transcript for this course. So again, $90 fee covered by Megan and company. Please fill out that form. I'll follow up with this document here if you indicate you want a credit. All of this will come to you in a separate email later this afternoon. So thanks all so much. We're a couple minutes over. I apologize for that. Elise, Kristen, and myself, at least I'll speak for myself. I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes to answer any questions. But yeah, I appreciate you all being here. Thanks so much, team, and look forward to working with you in 24, 25 school year and beyond. Judy, I don't think that you need to make a new ID number if you have an ID number. So that may apply to a number of folks in here. If you already have an ID number, I might skip to the 3rd question and use that ID number to register for this course. Evelyn, you too. Yep.
What if we don't remember an ID number? Do we have one in a previous email?
I think it's in an email, Shannon. Yeah, I would go back into the archives.
What would I search under, your name or?
No, it would be through CU.
Okay.
I would search student ID
Look for
number
identikey.
Probably. Identikey. Yeah.
Identikey.
Thanks, Shauna.
Identikey. Okay. Thank you.
And you say it's not too late to submit yesterday's stuff also?
Not at all, Veronica. Do you have that survey form? I guess it's in the...
Yeah, I think it's in the email or one of those.
Great.
Yeah, I should still
Thanks,
have
Veronica.
it. All right, cool. Thank you. This was great. It was fantastic. I'm all excited now.
Me too. I'm all jacked up too, Veronica.
I know.
Thank you.
Now what am I going to do? Because where I'm at, it's 3 o'clock. All right. Well, you gave me a lot to work with. Thanks again.
Thanks. Kirsten, thanks so much for coming back here. It's good to see you. I look forward to working with you this year.
Yeah, Kirsten, awesome. I think we're a kindred spirit, Kez.
Yeah, John's stuck with us. It's fine.
You're stuck with me. Thanks for being here.
Okay. Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much, John. It was great to see you again.
Yeah, you too, Randy. We'll be in touch, I'm sure. Enjoy the rest of your summer.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
Hey, John, I was wondering, what's the outlook on ever having another fire science?
Yeah, I think the outlook is really good. If you've seen, there's a puzzle piece that looks at fire speed, defining megafires, not by size, but by speed. And I am waiting for the scientists that helped me write that puzzle piece are publishing those data in, I think, Science magazine fairly soon. And as soon as that publication is out in the world, then I'm going to promote a fire science event. So look out for that. That'll certainly be this fall. Yeah, I'm psyched about that. Yeah, thanks, Joanne.
Ooh, thank you, Elise. Elisa.
Just want to say thank you. It was a really good workshop.
Bill, it's great to meet you this summer, and I look forward to working with you more in the future.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye out for. I'm on your email list now, right? I'll keep an eye out for.
Yeah, now that you're on my list, I'll pepper you a little bit. So
that sounds good to me.
I don't want to let you go, Bill. All right, thanks.
All right, see you later.
All right, Kristen and Elise. Oh, Anita.
Yeah, I have just one quick question. For this, I have been joining from India, so I had a tablet. I couldn't do the Google form. So yesterday, as we were working, I was writing my notes. So is it okay if I just take a picture of it have numbers on it as I was as an evidence in the last because I don't have anything but this tablet, and it doesn't allow me to do uh, Google that well with Samsung Galaxy. Is that okay?
Anita, that works for me. If you want to send me an image of some of the things that you've
Okay.
taken away, that would be great.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay. Thank you very much. It was really great, PD. I look forward to using all the resources. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks, Anita.
Thank you.
Judy, Shannon, I'm gonna kind of close up shop here. So I've been lucky to get to work with you both in the past and look forward to keep doing good things together. So we'll see y'all and talk to y'all soon. You
did it!
Pause recording.